Chapter 1165. Of course, he knew that the demonic ghosts in the demon ghost realm were prepared to open the demonic ghost's immortal slaughtering array one day. This was the destiny of the demon ghost realm. However, when the day really came, especially when he, the torture envoy, personally opened the array, he stood in the white light and burst into tears. Listening to the endless miserable howls, his face was covered with tears, and his heart felt as if it was being cut by a knife. Yu Qianqiu suddenly waved his green robe sleeves and fiercely wiped away his tears. He raised one hand to the sky and shouted, "I, Yu Qianqiu, swear to the heavens that in the future, I will exterminate the entire devil Dao and sacrifice countless lives in my demon ghost domain. If I violate this oath, I will be destroyed by the heavens. I violate this oath by the heavens, and the earth will destroy." When he said the last sentence, he was already choking with sobs, but every word penetrated through the endless mournful wails and reverberated in the sky. The movements in the surroundings were already frightening enough, but he suddenly made such a terrible oath without being forced by anyone. This caused everyone to tremble. Not good. Something is fishy. Yan Zhuoxing immediately recovered from his shock and pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, "Quickly kill him! Quickly kill him! Let's kill him together." This scene caused him to be extremely terrified, and he no longer cared about the lives of his mother and sister. The four great demon kings woke up from their stupor and immediately attacked Yu Qianqiu with all their strength. The army in the sky also attacked with all their might. Countless rays of light burst out at the same time, as if they wanted to make a hole in the ground. The bright light instantly enveloped the entire Shuntian island. Boom! The heaven and earth shook, and a huge golden light suddenly soared into the sky, effortlessly blasting away all the attacking lights. The golden light soared into the sky, and a majestic and ancient aura surged out as if it wanted to devour the heaven and earth. Li Tian, Shadow Knight, Blood Shadow, Ying Long, and Yan Zhuoxing all vomited a mouthful of blood as they were sent flying by the recoil. The thousands of wyverns that were blocking the sky above Obedient Island were instantly turned to ash by the golden light. The surrounding wyverns were also sent flying in all directions as if struck by a powerful shockwave. It was unknown how many were killed or injured in a short period of time. At the same time, the water level of Shuntian Island began to drop rapidly, but the water level around it began to rise rapidly. The entire 1,000-mile lake formed into a giant whirlpool, and the wind and waves grew stronger and stronger. Standing in the center of the whirlpool, Shuntian Island revealed its true appearance, like a giant pillar piercing into the lake. Standing on the island, Yu Qianqiu, who was wrapped in white light, looked at them coldly as if he was looking at a dead man. Yan Zhuoxing, who was clutching his chest, turned pale with fright. Not good. Let's go. Let's retreat. He finally realized that the Obedient Island that had shaken the world for countless years was not to be trifled with. Once it showed its might, no matter how high its cultivation base was, it was impossible for them to resist. Seeing the changes in the demon domain becoming more and more shocking, how could he dare to stay any longer? The only thought in his mind was to escape. At this moment, even if he didn't say it, the others wouldn't stay either. Ying Long pulled him up and shouted to his subordinates, who were still in a daze, "Retreat!" The few great demon kings quickly dragged Yan Zhuoxing and fled. Those wyverns that could still escape immediately flew away as if they didn't care about their lives. Who would continue to fight with such a terrifying person? The sky here is my sky. The land here is my land. The demon ghost domain here is my demon ghost domain. Here I am the heaven and earth. If I want you to die, no one can escape," roared Yu Qianqiu as he waved his hand and pointed at the fading light. All of a sudden, the earth-shattering screams from all directions disappeared. The blue sky above the lake was instantly covered by the dark clouds that were approaching at lightning speed. In an instant, the entire lake turned pitch black. The lightning in the sky was like a raging dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Clang, 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 clang. The thunderbolts in the sky were like raging dragons baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The whirlpool that revolved around the Obedient Island quickly stirred up an endless amount of water mist and produced an incomparably strong suction force. The surrounding dark clouds that contained the energy of countless demons and ghosts were quickly sucked into the whirlpool. It was as majestic as the heavenly river flowing backwards. Suddenly, Li Tian and the others found that they couldn't fly anymore. The suction force behind them was too strong, and it was actually pulling them back. When they looked back at the terrifying whirlpool that seemed to be able to devour everything, they were immediately scared out of their wits. Now, none of them would think that using 4 demon kings to deal with a single Yu Qianqiu was making a mountain out of a molehill. Needless to say, the flying dragon army that was trying to escape had completely lost the ability to resist. They screamed as they were pulled back by the powerful suction force. Those with higher cultivation bases were flapping their wings desperately, trying to escape from this terrifying place. However, the suction force was getting stronger and stronger, and the speed at which they were being pulled back was getting faster and faster. Screams and cries rang out all of a sudden. "What are you screaming for?" Demon King Yinglong shouted angrily. He turned around and said, "Everyone, let's work together and use all our strength. I don't believe we can't break out of this place." As soon as he said this, the Demon Kings quickly hugged each other and hugged Yan Zhuixing in the middle. Together, they exerted their strength and moved forward against the cold wind that was as sharp as steel blades. Sure enough, their speed had increased a lot. The remaining flying dragon army also joined together into a huge group. Now that they were united, they could continue flying. The obedient island, which was like a huge stone pillar stuck in the center of the lake, rumbled as the endless dark clouds that contained enormous energy poured into it through the whirlpool. Wrapped in a white light, Yu Qianqiu stood at the edge of the obedient island looking down. Up until now, he only knew that the demonic ghost punishing array had been activated. The ultimate move was yet to come, but he didn't know what kind of ultimate move it was. Looking at the slowly rising obedient island, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He originally thought that the reason the obedient island was like a pillar stuck deep in the bottom of the lake was because of a special natural landform. But now, it seemed that this pillar-like obedient island was deliberately inserted here when the array was being laid. He didn't know where they got such a long stone pillar. The dark clouds in the distance suddenly gathered countless bolts of lightning that resembled furious dragons. Guang, guang, guang. The bolts of lightning struck the demon kings and the wyvern army that were trying to escape, as though warning them that no one would be able to easily escape from my hands. The bolts of lightning caused them to wail like ghosts and howl like wolves. The might of the lightning was much greater than the lightning that Yu Qianqiu had cast. The escaping group was immediately split apart. The suction force that was getting stronger and stronger immediately pulled all of them back. The few demon kings tried their best to stabilize themselves, but they could not do anything as they were involuntarily drifted downwards along with the whistling dark clouds. Their cultivation seemed so powerless. All of a sudden, the dark clouds disappeared in front of them, flowing backwards. The sun returned to their eyes and the suction force immediately decreased. The group of people quickly looked back and saw that the last wisp of dark cloud that looked like black silk had been sucked into the whirlpool. The whirlpool's spinning speed had also slowed down, and the turbulent lake surface was gradually calming down. A 1,000-meter-tall stone pillar rose straight up and floated above the lake. There was a golden mist revolving around the huge stone pillar. It was a magnificent sight, like a pillar that supported the heavens. Yu Qianqiu, who was wrapped in white light, stood on top of the tall stone pillar and looked at them. Just as the stone pillar rose out of the lake, all the suction force disappeared. The lake water was still rippling as it reminisced about the surging waves from before. The group looked at each other and the demon kings looked at each other. Finally, they looked at Yan Zhuixing, who still had a lingering fear in his heart. They seemed to be asking, "It seems like everything is fine now. Should we continue to kill Yu Qianqiu? Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to explain to the Demon King 3 nights when they returned." Yan Zhuixing's expression twitched. This seemed to be a rare opportunity, but he was already scared of Yu Qianqiu. Every time victory was in his grasp, he would be scared to death. He was always the one at a disadvantage. Looking at the strange appearance of that sky-reaching pillar, he didn't dare to give the order to continue. But what if Yu Qianqiu was just trying to scare them? That guy might really do something like that. He was in a dilemma. Suddenly, everyone's pupils shrank. They saw a series of spiderweb-like cracks appear on the towering stone pillar, and large pieces of rock started falling down, creating huge waves on the surface of the lake. A golden object with shining golden patterns gradually revealed its extraordinary appearance. After a large piece of rock fell down and smashed on the surface of the lake, a huge, sharp, golden diamond-shaped arrowhead was exposed. Golden mist coiled around it, and a majestic ancient aura of vicissitudes rushed over, causing people's minds to tremble uncontrollably. Not only their bodies, even their souls felt an indescribable fear. It was so oppressive that it almost suffocated them. With one look, it was obvious that it was a terrifying divine object that was so powerful that it made people tremble. Everyone was dumbfounded, but something in Yan Zhuixing's body seemed to be agitated. He quickly woke up and shouted, "Not good. Run." Almost at the same time, all the dusty stones fell off, creating huge waves on the surface of the lake. A majestic and terrifying divine weapon stood in the air. It was in the shape of a huge golden divine arrow. The feathers of the arrow were clustered together with golden light. The sword shaft was cast with 6 grooves, and the golden mist coiled around the arrowhead. Not only was it majestic, it was even more ferocious and domineering, looking down on the blue dome of heaven. In the distant past, it had once pulled its bowstring and made the sun and the moon lose their light. Its golden feathers flew and divided time and space. Its former owner was an ancient god named Yi. It once had a name that made all gods tremble, sky and earth-splitting arrow. Yu Qianqiu, who was wrapped in a bleak white light, stared dumbfoundedly at the divine object beneath his feet. Although he had never seen the heaven-splitting arrow, he knew at first glance that it was the heaven-splitting arrow that had once captivated him. Other than this majestic object in front of him, what else was worthy of being called the heaven-splitting arrow? Chapter 1166. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that the other 9,999 divine swords that he coveted were right next to him. He didn't expect that the great god Yi's heaven and earth-splitting arrow was right under his butt, so close to him, but he didn't even know it. Annoyance, surprise, all kinds of expressions of disbelief appeared on his face. He regretted that he discovered it too late. He felt that the myriad swords demon monarch's joke had gone too far. The obedient island was actually the heaven and earth-splitting arrow. So the ultimate move of the demonic ghost slaughtering formation was to inject the energy of countless demonic ghosts into the heaven and earth-splitting arrow, using the might of a supreme divine weapon to kill all enemies. Yu Qianqiu, who was wrapped in the white light, suddenly felt that his mind was connected with the heaven and earth-splitting arrow. He could feel the endless power in the arrow, a power that could destroy everything. He could also faintly feel the terrifying aura of the golden feather that could split the space and time. Run, Kaka. Let's see where you can run to. All of you leave your lives behind. Yu Qianqiu let out a sky-shaking laughter. He waved his finger and shouted with a majestic voice, "Myriad sword execution. Kill." Boom. The golden feather exploded, and the heaven and earth-splitting arrow immediately split into 9,999 divine swords, each shining with divine light, many times more dazzling than the divine sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Tens of thousands of swords tore through the air, and tens of thousands of golden specks of light shot out in all directions. The entire 1,000-mile lake was instantly vaporized by the powerful energy. The endless white mist was dispersed by the powerful shockwave, and the entire 1,000-mile lake disappeared in an instant. The power of this attack was simply indescribable. The sky was shaking and the earth was shaking. Countless living beings in the human world were terrified. The mountains and rivers shifted and the rivers changed their course. It was as if there was a great earthquake. All the dormant volcanoes or active volcanoes in the human world erupted at the same time. If one looked down from the endless starry sky, one would see spots of red magma on the ground. This was because the heaven and earth-splitting arrow had not fully assembled, and this was because the heaven and earth-splitting arrow did not absorb enough energy. Otherwise, the entire human world could be destroyed in an instant, or it could bring the entire human world to another space and time. With the great god Yi's cultivation, anything was possible. Demon King Li Tian and the others were swept away by the distorted airflow, drifting about uncontrollably. How could they still escape? Looking at the countless golden flowing lights splitting the sky and earth, the world-shaking momentum was simply unstoppable. All of them were scared out of their wits and screamed wildly. No! The Wyvern army cried out miserably. The 4 demon kings' sorrowful cries shook the heavens. They finally realized that they had attracted a terrifying calamity. What demonic path unifying the 3 realms? At this moment it seemed so childish. They didn't even have the chance to resist, nor did they have the strength to resist. Yan Zhuixing's eyes were filled with endless fear and despair. He could not imagine that there was such a terrifying god artifact hidden in the demon realm. How could such a god artifact exist in the human world? He could not imagine that Yu Qianqiu still had such a terrifying ultimate move. Even if the Demon King 3 Knight came personally, he would not be able to block this attack. It was so terrifying that it was beyond imagination. No. Yan Zhuixing cried out miserably. His pupils shrunk, reflecting the 10,000 golden lights that came instantly. If he was given another chance, he was willing to give up everything and never step into the demon realm again. In an instant, all the screams stopped, and there was only the sound of the world shaking and rumbling. Regardless of whether or not the several tens of thousands of people were struck by the divine swords, they were all turned into ashes when the divine swords brushed past them. The so-called 4 great demon kings were nothing more than a joke who overestimated themselves from the bottom of a well. They were similarly unable to withstand a single blow, and all of them vanished into thin air. Yu Qianqiu, who was wrapped in the white light, was completely fine. However, he was startled by the power of nearly 10,000 divine swords. With one move, the entire 1,000-mile lake disappeared, evaporating in an instant. What kind of demonic expert was this? He was not even worth a fart. The power was simply unimaginable. Yu Qianqiu, whose mouth was dry, was just about to call back those 9,999 divine swords when he suddenly discovered that there was a ball of black light in the midst of the golden sword rain that was trying to escape with something wrapped in it. That terrifying aura that shocked the world appeared again. Yu Qianqiu had an unforgettable memory of this terrifying aura of a sovereign descending upon the world. The scene in the Spirit Fang Valley immediately appeared in his mind. The reason why Yan Zhuoxian could come back to life was because he was saved by this black light. Demon God. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Demon God attacked again. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Stop it! Kill it! Don't let it get away!" The 9,999 divine swords immediately blocked the path of retreat of the black light. They surrounded it and slaughtered it. However, the black light was extremely agile. It dodged the sword rain with great agility, as if it did not dare to touch the sharp edge of the divine swords. While it was dodging, the 10,000 divine swords immediately formed a formation and surrounded it tightly like an iron bucket. Just as all the divine swords were about to explode and turn black light into a hedgehog, a loud boom suddenly rang out in the sky, causing the earth to tremble. Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw a huge demon claw directly tearing the space apart. It grabbed the endless darkness and flicked its 5 fingers. Immediately, the 9,999 divine swords were sent flying away in a mess. In the hazy gray fog that suddenly appeared in the void, a pair of slender and huge illusory eyes suddenly appeared. The cold and emotionless eyes looked down indifferently. Demon God. UF** King Bullius Jr.'s. What's the use of fighting? If you have the guts, fight with Dao. Yu Qianqiu angrily pointed at the sky and shouted with all his strength. Then he waved his arms. Nearly 10,000 divine swords that had fallen apart gathered from all directions to form the heaven and earth splitting arrow that shone with divine light. The demon claw that tore the space apart set off endless wind and clouds. Just when it was about to grab the black light and take it away, Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily. The heaven and earth splitting arrow stabbed into the back of the hand of the huge demon claw. The demon claw trembled. Obviously it was hurt. With a shake, it shook away the heaven and earth splitting arrow and temporarily gave up on saving the black light. The huge devil claw quickly changed direction, blotting out the sky as it clawed towards Yu Qianqiu. *CK your ancestors. Yu Qianqiu cursed. Just when he was about to run away, there was another loud bang in the sky. A huge golden dragon claw covered with golden scales tore the space apart and grabbed the wrist of the huge demon claw. The 2 hands were in a stalemate in the air. Yu Qianqiu was also very bold. He was slightly stunned and thought, could it be that I also have a powerful backer who came to save me? So he gathered his courage and waited. In fact, he was worried that the heaven and earth splitting arrow that he had just obtained would be taken away by the demon god. He quickly called the heaven and earth splitting arrow back. The divine arrow that was connected with his mind quickly shrank under the control of his mind. Knight, have you forgotten our agreement? How dare you personally intervene in the affairs of the human world? Isn't it unfair? An ancient voice rumbled in the air. Coiling dragon. It's you who broke the agreement. How dare you move the heaven and earth splitting arrow from another time and space to boost the power? How can it be fair? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Another cold and ruthless voice rumbled in the air. Knight. You secretly sent your demon blade to the human world to wait for a chance. Do you think we don't know? You sent the demon blade first, then we sent the heaven and earth splitting arrow later. What's unfair about that? The ancient voice sounded again, but there was a hint of questioning in it. Coiling dragon. The power of the heaven and earth splitting arrow is far stronger than my demon blade. Is this fair? Also, how do you explain that you sent the star bead down? The cold and ruthless voice questioned back. The star bead belongs to the virtuous. It has been like this since ancient times. Whoever gets it is the one with the ability. There is no bias. Moreover, the heaven and earth splitting arrow was given to your descendants. Don't tell me you don't know. Otherwise, with your personality, I'm afraid you wouldn't have waited until today to tell me about the heaven and earth splitting arrow. It's your descendants who didn't have the fortune to enjoy it and left it here. As a result, it fell into the hands of others. How can you blame us? The ancient voice said calmly and reasonably. This is obviously a trap designed by you. You've gone too far. The cold and ruthless voice said sternly. If you want to twist words and force logic, then there's nothing we can do. You and I will go find Tao together and argue with him. Let's see how he decides. As the ancient voice fell, the huge golden dragon claw loosened its demon claw and retracted back into the torn space. The pitch-black space crack instantly closed up. The cold eyes in the sky saw that the black light had already escaped. It didn't say anything else. It seemed that the bickering was to buy time for the black light to escape. The demon claw also retracted back into the torn space crack. The cold eyes clearly turned and stared at Yu Qianqiu, who raised his head to look at the sky with his mouth agape. Then the cold eyes disappeared and the sky returned to normal. After a long while, Yu Qianqiu's lifeless eyes slowly moved and he gradually came to his senses. He casually wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and mumbled with a dry mouth, "Damn it! I'm not dreaming, am I? Could it be that the demon god and the coiling dragon god were talking just now?" Although he knew that what happened just now was definitely real, he still didn't dare to believe it. What was terror? This was true terror. They were amazing people who could casually tear open space and appear. All the experts he had seen before were simply trash in front of them. The difference in ability between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. What demon monarch 3 knights? He could easily block the passage to a realm. Compared to these terrifying fellows from the immortal realm, they were simply not worth mentioning. Not good. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and looked around. The shadow of the black light was already nowhere to be seen. He immediately stomped his feet and cursed, "Yanjuashing, I'll give it to you. You actually summoned the demon god from the immortal realm to save you. There's no way to fight this battle anymore." Chapter 1167. After cursing for a while, Yu Qianqiu became more and more discouraged. It wasn't that he couldn't fight anymore, but that he really couldn't fight anymore. He had repeatedly killed Yanjuashing, and the demon god had once again helped Yanjuashing. If this continued, what use would it be even if he was more powerful? Especially this time, it was even more exaggerated. The demon god had brazenly attacked him without regard for his identity. It was terrifying. He even suspected that the demon god was sick. He had left his descendants trapped in the demon realm for so many years, and yet he had to go against a nobody like him time and time again for Yanjuashing. It was simply too ridiculous. He finally understood that in front of an expert like the God Fiend, it would be useless no matter where he hid. Be it in the 3 realms, the Divine Ruin Realm or Utopia, the God Fiend could just tear through space and kill him. Where could he escape to? If not for God Coiling Dragon stopping him, he would have died even if he had flashed to Utopia. However, he felt a little relieved when he thought about it. After all, God Coiling Dragon had stopped him at the critical moment. Otherwise he would have really been finished. In fact, he did not know that he had insulted the demon god and even F***ed his ancestors, but the demon god did not do anything to him. However, he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and actually used the heaven-splitting arrow to attack the demon god. It should be known that the heaven-splitting arrow was not an ordinary divine weapon. That had also hurt the demon god. Even in the divine realm, not many people dared to do that to him, let alone in the mortal world. It would be strange if he did not attack in anger. Putting himself in the demon god's shoes, he would have done the same. In fact, he should feel honored. In the 3 realms and the divine realm, who could still survive after cursing and hitting the demon god? He was the only one. Yu Qianqiu was a little too pessimistic. Although the demon god was ruthless, he had his pride. After all, he was known as the #1 expert in the divine realm. The protective demonic light that he had injected into Yanjuashing could only protect him 3 times. After those 3 times, he would no longer be able to help Yanjuashing. If a person who had been given 3 chances to be reborn could not be supported, then to a proud person like the God Fiend, he was simply a piece of trash. It was impossible for him to repeatedly intervene in the lower realm from the immortal realm for such a piece of trash. No matter what, he would not be able to explain himself. No matter how powerful and terrifying the demon god was, life was still how it should be. Yu Qianqiu soon found something exciting again. After all, he had obtained the remaining 9,999 divine swords. Now that the 10,000 swords were gathered, it would be strange if he was not happy. Yu Qianqiu put away the heaven's eye mirror and happily played with the heaven-splitting earth arrow that had shrunk to a meter long. Suddenly he let out a cry of surprise. He saw that the dazzling divine light on the heaven-splitting earth arrow was gradually dimming, and soon after, it became incomparably heavy. As the divine arrow turned into an ancient light gold color, the entire sword became inconceivably heavy. He clenched his teeth and held on for a while, but he could no longer hold on to it. What's going on? Yuqinsho suddenly panicked. Just now, he felt that he was connected with the heaven-splitting ear-splitting arrow. But now the connection was completely severed. He quickly dodged. The entire 1,000-mile lake had completely dried up. The original bottom of the lake had cracked into pieces. Although the divine arrow had shrunk, it was too heavy. It had sunk deep into the soil. However, Yuqinsho had the help of the earth formula. He quickly found it more than 10 meters underground. He hugged it a few times but he still could not move it. So he quickly opened up a space underground. He circled around the divine arrow that was lying quietly on the ground. Was it because he put away the heavenly eye mirror? Yuqinsho took out the heavenly eye mirror and once again used the method to activate the demonic ghost immortal punishing array. A hazy white light shone on the divine arrow. However, the divine arrow lay there peacefully. It did not move at all. He shone the heavenly eye mirror several times, but there was no reaction. Then he recalled the scene when he pulled the divine sword out of immortal crocodile's body at the bottom of the lake. At first he could not move it. It was only after he absorbed his blood that it recognized him as its master. Yuqinsho touched his chin and nodded thoughtfully. He felt that this should be the case. So, he made up his mind and cut his right index finger. He squatted on the ground and continuously smeared his blood on the divine arrow. In the end, the blood that he squeezed out almost covered the entire divine arrow. He waited for a long time, but the divine arrow still lay there motionless. Damn it! It can't be. Even if you want to fool me, you can't fool me like this. Yuqinsho felt like crying as he sucked on his bitten finger. He had wasted a lot of blood, but the divine arrow did not appreciate it at all. He had painstakingly obtained the divine arrow, but he could not control it. It was no different from scrap metal. How was he going to fight with this thing that he could not even move? Yuqinsho sat down on the opposite side of the divine arrow dejectedly. He looked at the divine arrow in a daze. He was indignant, very indignant. What was in his hands was not his. There was no way he could explain it. His listless eyes were filled with infinite grief. Suddenly his gaze focused. He found that among the 6 pairs of symmetrical arrows that were clustered by whiskers, one side seemed to be missing a slanted feather compared to the other side. Upon closer inspection, each feather was an extremely miniaturized version of a divine sword. Yuqinsho's eyes immediately brightened. He impatiently took out his divine sword and kept shouting little, little, little. When the divine sword shrunk to the same size as the feather in his hand, he held it in his hand and lay on the ground with his butt sticking up. Then he carefully filled the empty space with the extremely small divine sword. At the moment when the sword was inserted, a clear and bright sound reverberated in the small underground space. The sound was so crisp and sweet that it could cleanse people's hearts. A majestic aura was like the morning bell and evening drum, telling the truth of the endless cycle of the sun rising and setting. The entire divine arrow surged up and down with a swish, flowing golden light, as if a dead thing had regained its vitality. Yuqinsho sat up straight and rubbed his hands excitedly, as if he had seen a peerless beauty and could not wait to kiss her. Suddenly, a strange phenomenon occurred. A fan-shaped ray of light shot out from the divine arrow and shone in the underground space. In the golden light, a tall and strong man appeared. He had bronze skin and was wearing a leopard skin shirt that covered half of his body, covering his knees. An ancient vine was tied around his waist. His arms and half of his shoulders were exposed. He did not wear pants or shoes. He was barefooted on the ground and the soles of his feet were wide. The muscles on his arms, chest, and legs undulated like big rocks in the ravine, appearing very full and powerful. His hair was pinned up with a beast tooth. His resolute face exuded a sense of sincerity and simplicity. His thick lips made people feel very at ease. He had an amiable and simple appearance, but there was a cloud pattern on his forehead that sparkled like starlight. On his shoulder, there was a 7-colored curved bow that looked strong and powerful like the roots of an old tree. The bowstring was like a psychedelic star, but it was slanted on his back, making people unable to see the bow clearly. A quiver was carried on his back, and inside the quiver, there were 9 arrows with more than half of their golden feathers exposed. Judging from the shape of the feathers, it was exactly the same as the arrow of Genesis. This man who suddenly appeared in the golden light and shadow, did not have any hostility. He always gave people a feeling of peace and serenity without any pressure. He looked exactly like a hunter, but the extraordinary bow and arrow and the cloud pattern that was shining like stars on his forehead, all proved that this man had an extraordinary background. Yu Qianqiu sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at him with his mouth wide open. After a long while he smacked his lips, swallowed his saliva and asked weakly, You are the great god Yi? The man looked at him with a faint and kind smile, and replied in a simple and plain manner, Hello. My name is Yi. Oh my god. It really is the great god Yi. Yu Qianqiu crawled up to his feet, patted the dirt off his butt, and wiped his hands on his clothes. It had been a long time since he had heard the word hello, so he subconsciously wanted to flatter and shake hands with a senior leader. Only when he stretched out his hand did he realize that this was not the place to do it. He nodded and bowed. That? Old man, didn't you die already? He did not feel any hostility from the man, and he had never met such a senior person who did not put on airs. So he decided not to hide anything and spoke his mind directly. The eternal universe is endless. Life is death and death is life. The great god Yi looked at him and smiled warmly. It seems that you know me. It is right to say that I am dead. After all, I no longer exist in the universe in the form of a physical body. But it is also wrong to say that I am completely dead. My 3 souls and 7 spirits are attached to the supreme god Bao, and the other 2 souls and 7 spirits are attached to the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. When the supreme god Bao and the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows reunite, it will be the time of my rebirth. Amazing. Amazing. Yu Qianqiu was full of praise. He clasped his hands in front of his chest like a fan who saw his idol. It was so comfortable to chat with this super expert who answered everything asked and spoke without beating around the bush. Suddenly, he pointed at himself and said, Then why did you suddenly come out to see me? Do you have any advice for me? His eyes were already gradually shining, and he suspected that the man was going to teach him some peerless martial arts. I didn't come to see you and I don't have any advice for you. The great god Yi answered. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He thought that the great god Yi did not know how to be more tactful with his words. He then smiled and said, Then what is it? When the thousands of swords reunited to form the heaven and earth splitting arrow, I suddenly felt the breath of an unfamiliar expert from the arrow. A very powerful expert. It was this strong breath that woke me up from my deep sleep. The great god Yi looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head. I didn't expect you to have the star orb that was made from Tao. But it is not you. You are too weak. You are not the strange expert that had the ability to wake me up. I have the star orb? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. He was sitting on a mountain of treasures but he did not know it. Now that this layer of window paper was suddenly revealed, he shivered and immediately understood that the golden orb in his body was the star orb. No wonder it was so magical. It was said that the owner of the star orb could become a god. Could it be that I will become a god in the end? Chapter 1168. All kinds of inexplicable excitement surged in him, making him tremble with excitement. However, it was only for a short while before he suddenly thought of the tens of thousands of graves lying quietly in the barrier of gods. There were many god-tier experts resting in those graves, and even those who were conferred the title of god were killed by others. It seemed that gods were not that valuable after all. Looking at this awesome person in front of him who could split a space-time with one arrow, and the demon god and the coiling dragon god who came to the human world with one arm, they could also tear the void at any time. Therefore, the little bit of excitement disappeared instantly. It seemed that becoming a god was just like that. Even among the gods there were big shots. Life was the same no matter where one went. Tell me, before the heaven and earth splitting arrow was completely fused, did you come into contact with any experts? Great god Yi looked at him and asked sincerely. Perhaps it was more appropriate to say that he was asking for advice. Yu Qianqiu blinked his eyes. Those who were killed before the fusion of the heaven and earth splitting arrow were definitely not the so-called experts that great god Yi mentioned. Other than them, it would be the coiling dragon god and the demon god. However, the coiling dragon god did not come into contact with the heaven and earth splitting arrow, only the demon god and the demon god had fought with the heaven and earth splitting arrow. Since great god Yi was sincere, Yu Qianqiu did not dare to make a rash judgment. So he said tentatively, just now the coiling dragon god appeared. Coiling dragon? Great god Yi was startled, then he shook his head slightly and said, Not coiling dragon. I am very familiar with coiling dragon's aura, and this person is stronger than coiling dragon. He has a strong destructive power, not any of the original great gods. It should be someone else. As soon as this was said, Yu Qianqiu immediately said with certainty, "There is another person who appeared. I heard that it is the number one expert in the divine world, the demon god Yi. Just now he did fight against the heaven and earth splitting arrow, but it was the coiling dragon god who stopped it. Maybe the heaven and earth splitting arrow was contaminated with his aura." Divine world? Demon god Yi? The number one expert in the divine world? Is it an expert from another spacetime? Great god Yi thought for a while and shook his head slowly. "It seems that I have been away for too long. I don't understand what you are talking about. Young man, can you explain it to me?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment and then he understood. When the great god Yi Jujian divided the 10 spaces, there were only the 72 worlds of the human world and the underworld. The immortal world, the underworld, or the divine world did not exist. Of course, people did not know what was going on. It's like this. Yu Qianqiu immediately told her the legend of how the great god Yi shot the sun and forced everyone to open up the immortal realm and then the god realm. Then he roughly told her the story about the devil god that he heard from Grandma Yen. Finally he asked, "Is the devil god really that powerful? Can you beat him?" "So that's how it is. Why did Dao do this?" Great god Yi murmured to himself and then looked at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "This devil god is really powerful. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to wake me up from my long sleep. It turns out that the remaining people are indeed not his match. Even though he's the number one expert in the god realm right now, there's still quite a gap between us. At the very least, his cultivation hasn't reached the level where the war god could summon 10 suns with a single rage. If the war god wasn't my match, then he naturally won't be my match either." Although he was flaunting his higher cultivation, he didn't sound like he was boasting at all. Instead, he gave off the feeling of being realistic and honest, just like his appearance, not arrogant nor discouraged. "But I heard a saying that Dao is the real number one expert," Yu Qianqiu asked awkwardly and weakly. "Could it be that Dao is also not a match for the devil god? Are you more powerful than Dao?" Dao. The great god Yi looked at Yu Qianqiu strangely. He seemed to be wondering why Yu Qianqiu didn't know anything about the Dao, since he could come into contact with the coiling dragon and the devil god. Then he smiled and said, "No one can be a match for the Dao, not even me. However, the Dao won't treat anyone as an opponent because there is no opponent in the Dao." He said something but did not make it clear. Instead, it made Yu Qianqiu confused. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Great god Yi smiled and said, "Thank you for solving my confusion. We will meet again if fate allows it." He was about to leave. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Senior Yi, please wait. I have something to ask." Great god Yi paused and smiled. "What is it?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He slapped his forehead as he did not remember what he wanted to ask. Then he asked awkwardly, "I wonder if you know Chang'e?" "Who is Chang'e?" Great god Yi was stunned. Then Yu Qianqiu made an arc on his chest and reminded, "She is a woman. I heard she is a very beautiful woman. Senior Yi, do you remember?" He asked this because he wanted to confirm the legend of his previous life. If there was really a beautiful woman like Chang'e in this world, he must not miss the chance. He must meet her and see how beautiful she was. A beautiful woman called Chang'e? The great god Yi thought about it seriously. After a while, he shook his head and said, "I've never seen or heard of her. From what you're saying, she's from the same era as me." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He wanted to ask what was the name of great god Yi's wife, but he thought that great god Yi could remember who his wife was. It seemed that the legend was misleading and could not be taken seriously. He coughed awkwardly and said, "It seems that I remembered wrongly." That. He suddenly remembered what he wanted to ask. He cupped his hands and said, "It is an honor for Yu Qianqiu to meet you. I want to ask you for a little help. I wonder if you can give me some advice?" The great god Yi was stunned. After sleeping for so many years, he'd finally awoken once with great difficulty, yet he encountered a fellow who spoke randomly. He couldn't help but be slightly at a loss of whether to laugh or cry as he said, "It's indeed fate that we're able to meet. But my vital soul isn't here now, and only a part of me remains. Even if I want to help you, I'm helpless. How about this? If you are fated to find the supreme divine bow where my life soul resides, and if it can resonate with this heaven and earth splitting arrow, allowing my soul to become one with it, I will try my best to help you as much as I can because of your help today." As soon as he finished speaking, the figure and the golden light instantly converged back into the sky-splitting arrow. Yu Qianqiu let out an "ah," and shouted repeatedly, "Senior! Senior! Senior!" Listen to what I have to say before you leave. Alas, no matter how he shouted, the great god Yi did not move. *CK. A curse was heard in the underground space. Yu Qianqiu looked at the divine arrow on the ground speechlessly. He wanted to know the whereabouts of the supreme divine bow. He was ready to combine the bow and arrow to kill Buddha. If he could find the supreme divine skill, he would not be so long-winded. Just as he was feeling a little disappointed, his face suddenly lit up. He suddenly realized that the godly arrow on the ground was once again connected to his mind. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Rise!" The godly sword lying quietly on the ground shot through the soil layer and flew out. He also darted out. Above the dried-up 1,000-mile lake, Yu Qianqiu commanded the divine arrow to fly all over the sky. Sometimes, it would separate into tens of thousands of flying swords, streaking across the sky like shooting stars. Sometimes they would combine back into the divine arrow, enlarging or shrinking. The pleasant feeling of being able to command the arrow like it was his own arm made him laugh out loud. This proved that this divine arrow had truly chosen its master, and it had completely become his divine weapon. After waving it for a while, he reassembled the divine arrow, which had shrunk to a meter long, and held it in his hand. He could clearly feel that it was much more powerful than when he only had the divine sword in his hand. Especially when it merged into the divine arrow, its power was even greater. However, compared to when he had activated the ghost demon immortal punishing formation, the difference was like heaven and earth. This was undoubtedly because it had absorbed the energy of the ghosts in the demon ghost domain. He finally understood that the divine arrow would be more powerful in the hands of people with higher cultivation. He still could not unleash the true power of this divine arrow. After a moment of excitement, Yu Qianqiu put away the divine arrow and looked around. His face sank again. He quickly flew above the demon ghost domain to examine the demon ghost domain after the demon ghost immortal punishment formation was activated. Not only had the entire 1,000 miles lake dried up, but there was not a trace of green in the vast demon ghost domain. There were collapsed mountains everywhere. Every piece of land seemed to have been plowed. The earth was twisted and there was no trace of life. The endless dark clouds that covered the sky of the demon ghost domain had disappeared without a trace. This place had become a completely new world. The demon ghost domain had completely disappeared. There was a hole in the ground that was still howling with cold wind. It was the entrance of the 9 Netherworld cavern. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows slightly trembled. It was unknown what he thought of, but he immediately rushed back to Obedient Island. Seeing that the demon world seal at the bottom of the 1,000 miles lake was still intact, he let out a sigh of relief. At first, he was worried that the power of the ghost demon immortal punishing formation would be too great and that the demon world seal would be opened. But now, it seemed that the water of the 1,000 miles lake had blocked some of its power. Adding on the fact that the demon world seal was not made of ordinary metal and stone, it was able to withstand it. Just as he let out a sigh of relief, he thought of the turmoil in the world. He was worried that the mortal world had been affected, so he quickly teleported to various places in the mortal world to check. As a result, he found that it had indeed affected the mortal world. Many places seemed to have experienced a great earthquake. Many houses had collapsed and deaths were inevitable. However, the disaster was still within the range that the mortal world could bear. Yu Qianqiu went to the place where his parents lived and found that they had not been affected. He couldn't help but let out a sigh. He could only hope that this was the last disaster he would bring to the mortal world in exchange for eternal peace. He was still standing in the canopy of the big tree behind his parents' house, watching as his parents helped a family whose house had collapsed in the village. He looked into the distance, where a volcano had suddenly erupted, and there was still billowing black smoke that had yet to subside. Seeing the volcano, he suddenly thought of the dragon under the drum of dusk in the demon ghost domain. Chapter 1169. The various restrictions in Twilight Valley had already been completely destroyed. The valley that had been engraved with drawings had already collapsed and been buried. Yu Qianqiu, who used both the metal art and earth art, quickly found the entrance to the Green Fire Forbidden Land. After discovering that the underground space was intact, he did not clear out the buried entrance. Instead, he used the metal art and earth art to seal the entrance. This was because from now on, this place was no longer the demon domain. Sooner or later, mortals would come here. He did not want the affairs of the cultivation world to cause any trouble for mortals. After escaping into the Green Fire Forbidden Land, Yu Qianqiu looked at the still rising blue flames. He had not expected that the opening of the demonic ghost immortal killing formation would attract the coiled dragon god and the demon god, and even see the great god Yi. With the appearance of these 3 big shots, Yu Qianqiu was no longer as terrified of the divine dragon trapped underground as he was before. He silently charged into the green fire, walked to the hole in the ground that was spewing green fire, looked down and directly jumped in. Yu Qianqiu passed through the tunnel of blue fire with ease. There was a flash of red light in front of him. It was still the same river of molten lava that he had first seen. In the vast and majestic underground world of molten lava, 9 huge blue lotus flowers bloomed on the flowing river of molten lava. The rolling blue flames came from the 9 blue lotus flowers. 8 of them were still in bud and 1 of them had completely bloomed. There was a faint layer of arc-shaped light covering it. Among the layers of petals, there was a green lotus head, and on it lay a naked child who was sleeping soundly with his legs spread out. The child was still the same child. Yu Qianqiu recognized him at a glance. After so many years he did not seem to have grown up at all. Yu Qianqiu flashed down with a smirk and landed on the blue lotus head. He gently kicked the child's buttocks and shouted, "Fat boy, I'm back." The naked child turned over reluctantly and murmured, "Why is it noisy again? It was so loud at the beginning. It scared me to death. It took me so much effort to fall asleep." He paused before he could finish his sentence. He seemed to feel that the sound was familiar. It did not seem to be the earth-shattering noise from before. He frowned and rubbed his eyes with the back of his chubby hand. Then he opened his sleepy eyes. It would have been better if he hadn't opened his eyes, but the moment he opened them, he saw a face smiling at him. This face was both unfamiliar and left a deep impression on him. It was the second person he had seen in his life. Instantly, he jumped up as if he had taken some strong medicine. "Dizzy." Without saying anything he kicked Yu Qianqiu. He didn't lose out at all. He was not at a disadvantage at all. Then he jumped directly into the red river of boiling lava and pointed at Yu Qianqiu. "It's you again, you fire thief. What do you want?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He found that although the fat boy's appearance had not changed, he was obviously more experienced in speaking. He folded his arms and smiled. "Go and call your grandfather out. Tell him I want to see him." Umph. The fat boy turned his head disdainfully and swam freely in the rolling lava river. It seemed that he was asking why he should listen to him. "Little brat, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Yu Qianqiu smirked. He opened his 5 claws and directly pulled the extremely arrogant fat boy from the boiling lava river. He grabbed his neck and sneered. "You have guts. You actually dare to kick me. Today I will teach you a lesson." The fat boy's face turned red from being choked. His eyes were filled with fear. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and directly smashed him back into the boiling lava river. The fat boy, who had sunk into the lava, quickly popped his head out to take a look at him. Then he plunged into the boiling river and disappeared. The smile on Yu Qianqiu's face disappeared. He folded his arms and stood silently in the middle of the blooming green lotus. He looked left and right and was on guard. Although he had 3 top masters in his heart, he still had no confidence in facing the trapped dragon god. He did not know the other party's temper at all, so he had to be careful. Not long after, the surging undercurrents in the lava river attracted his attention. The surface of the river surged in circles silently. As the surging grew larger and larger, Yu Qianqiu's pupils suddenly shrank. He still felt uneasy and nervous. After all, dragons had left a deep impression on him in his previous life. That majesty was engraved in the bones of every Chinese man and woman. Suddenly 2 huge, malevolent antlers rose up from the magma. Bang! The magma splashed everywhere, and a huge dragon head directly rushed out. A huge scaled body stretched out from the surface of the magma river. The huge dragon head slightly retracted and looked down majestically. It had a forehead that bulged like armor, a sharp nose, fangs that couldn't be covered even if it closed its mouth, and 2 catfish whiskers as thick as thighs. Its entire body was covered in a layer of bright red armor, and its 2 eyes that were as bright as lanterns stared downward, making people feel as if their souls couldn't move away. This was the power of a dragon. The naked fat boy who was standing between the ferocious antlers pointed down and shouted, "Grandpa! It's him. He's back to bully me again." The red dragon fiercely breathed out 2 red flames from its nostrils and breathed back. Its body climbed up again and its huge snake-like body rose again. The ferocious antlers on its head almost reached the top of the rock. At the same time, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. 2 sharp, mighty and terrifying claws rose from the magma. 2 golden chains locked onto the claws' wrists. "Human! How dare you come here and offend me again?" The red dragon's nostrils once again spewed out 2 streams of flames to show its majesty. Its rumbling voice echoed in the underground magma canyon. Do you know the consequences of offending the dignity of the dragon clan? It clenched its two huge claws forcefully, which was a little scary. Yu Qianqiu felt the majestic dragon's aura and adapted to it for a while. After calming down, he looked at the golden chains that locked the dragon's claws in the lava river. Then he braced himself and looked at the pair of bright and terrifying big eyes that were looking down at him. He smiled faintly and said, "Before I came here, I met the coiling dragon god." With just this sentence, the terrifying and oppressive aura emitted by the red dragon suddenly weakened, and Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a lot more relaxed. He knew that it was useful to carry the opponent's top boss out. He thought to himself that the coiling dragon god was indeed the supreme of the dragon race. The red dragon stared at him silently for a while, and then slowly sank into the lava river. The naked boy on its head immediately said anxiously, "Grandpa, hit him quickly. Help me hit him quickly." However, the huge dragon's body completely sank into the lava. The fat boy swayed a few times on the surface of the river and shouted, "Grandpa," several times, but there was no response. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was on the green lotus in the fire, and quickly hid in the lava. Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. He scratched his face and asked himself, "It's not that bad, right?" Just by using the name of the coiling dragon god, he immediately made the other party feel so ashamed that he didn't dare to show his face. You should at least ask whether it's true or not. Suddenly, a magnificent red light shone on the surface of the lava river, and a mighty old man with a red beard, red eyebrows, red hair, red clothes, and red skin rose from the red light. His whole body was fiery red, except for the two golden iron chains on his wrists. The red light on the surface of the river also quickly converged into his body as he rose. The red old man dragged the bracelets and flashed to the green lotus, standing face to face with Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at the golden iron chains on his wrists and realized that this old man should be the incarnation of the red dragon just now. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to pluck up his courage to ask, the other party first lowered his head and sighed, saying in an extremely ashamed tone, "I can feel it. The demonic spirit punishing array outside has been activated, and the coiling dragon ancestor has also arrived. I can feel the supreme aura of the dragon race from the patriarch, but I have no face to see him, so I can only hide underground and don't dare to make a sound. With the patriarch's cultivation, he must have also sensed that I'm here, but he didn't summon me. He must think that I've embarrassed the dragon race and doesn't want to see me again." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought to himself, so that's how it is. He already knows that the coiling dragon god has arrived. It seems that calling the coiling dragon god has hit the soft spot of the red dragon old man. Just as he was about to use the name of the coiling dragon god to intimidate the old man and ask what was going on, he saw the red dragon old man open his big mouth and wail loudly. He cried so sadly that tears flowed down his old face. The entire underground lava canyon was filled with his rumbling cries. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing opposite him, finally experienced what a deafening cry was. The fat child, who had secretly popped his head out of the lava river, was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. Grandpa is actually crying in front of that person? Yu Qianqiu was also a little dumbfounded. He didn't expect to see the underground dragon god in such a way. He was originally a little cautious and nervous, but when the old man cried, the tall, mighty and sacred image of the dragon in his heart was completely gone. Cough cough. Yu Qianqiu coughed awkwardly and comforted him. "Don't cry. Tell me what you've been through first." It would have been fine if he hadn't mentioned the word "been through," but the moment he mentioned it, the red dragon old man cried even more heartbreakingly. He stomped his feet and wailed, "I've been tricked by that bastard Yi Tiankong. That bastard lied to me so badly. I didn't complete the mission that the coiling dragon patriarch gave me. Instead, I've been trapped here for more than 100,000 years and lost the supreme dignity of the dragon race." Yu Qianqiu's teeth ached as he dug his ears. He wanted to see if his earwax had come out. He looked at his little finger. Fortunately, it wasn't. He wanted to ask what the mission that the coiling dragon patriarch gave him was, but the old man's cries were getting louder and louder. He couldn't communicate at all when he was sad. He immediately roared angrily, "Cry your mother. If you continue to cry, the coiling dragon god will lose all face. The entire dragon race will lose all face because of you." Chapter 1170. This shout was no less than a head-on blow. The old man immediately stopped crying and stopped crying. He wiped away his tears and asked Yu Qianqiu, "Who are you? Why are you here?" "I'm Yu Qianqiu." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he asked, What about you? Ong Tai Long. After the old red dragon introduced himself, he asked weakly, did Coiling Dragon Ancestor ask you to come? Ong Tai Long? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He sized up the other party and realized that he really lived up to his name. He avoided the question and asked, who is Yi Tiankong? How did you get tricked by him? Hong Tai Long looked at the golden chain in his hand. A mixture of anger and melancholy flashed across his face. There was even a hint of nostalgia. He sighed and said, Yi Tiankong is the fourth son of the demon world's third demon monarch. I was tricked by him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been trapped here for so many years. Demon world's third demon monarch. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and suddenly exclaimed, Demon monarch 3 nights? That Yi Tiankong you speak of is demon monarch 3 nights' son? That's right. He is demon monarch 3 nights' youngest son. Hong Tai Long nodded sadly. The fat kid swimming in the lava weakly came over and climbed up the green lotus to stand behind him. He peeked his head out and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Wait. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and asked with a face full of suspicion, weren't you trapped by demon monarch myriad swords? Why did you become demon monarch 3 nights' son Yi Tiankong? Demon monarch myriad swords. Demon monarch 3 nights. He was shocked and said, you mean? His face was full of disbelief. You guessed correctly. Hong Tai Long sighed and shook his head. Yi Tiankong is the myriad swords demon monarch. When I first met him, he said his name was Tiankong. He purposely hid the truth that his surname was Yi and deceived my trust. After obtaining the heaven and earth splitting arrow, he gave himself the name of myriad swords demon monarch. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he tried to figure out what was going on. However, there was one thing he couldn't figure out. He said in a low voice, if I remember correctly, when the myriad swords demon monarch appeared, the demonic world was already sealed. The demon monarch of 3 nights was sealed in the demonic world. How could his son be in the human world? Could it be that before the demonic world was sealed, the night sky had always been in the human world? I was the one who brought him from the devil realm to the human world. Hong Tai Long had an indescribable expression on his face. He said in a vexed and regretful tone, back then I received Patriarch Coiling Dragon's decree and brought along the heaven and earth splitting arrow and a jade archive to go to the lower realm to look for the person who could administer punishment on behalf of the heavens in order to pacify the disputes in the lower realm and rebuild a new order. Who knew that when I was about to leave Mount Dragon God, I would suddenly meet a good friend of mine from the dragon race. He heard some interesting stories about the demonic world and told me about it. In the end, it made my heart itch unbearably. After I reached the lower realm, I abused my power for personal gain. Relying on the heaven and earth splitting arrow's ability to traverse the passage between the 2 realms, I ran to the demonic world. The person who could administer punishment on behalf of the heavens? Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched. He sneered, so you met Yi Tiankong? Hong Tai Long nodded, a little ashamed, and said, in the end I traveled around the demonic world and discovered that it wasn't as fun as my friend had described. It was filled with blood and slaughter. Just as I was about to leave, I met Yi Tiankong, who was hesitating in front of the passage to the demonic world. I asked him what he was planning to do. As it turned out, he was also pondering how to leave the demonic world and travel to the outside world to broaden his horizons. It was fine when the 2 of us didn't talk, but once we did, that brat was too cunning. It didn't take him long to find out about my background. He beat around the bush and said that he was the person I was looking for, tricking me into bringing him out of the demonic world. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. Are you that gullible? You didn't even find out about his background, and you dared to give him the heaven and earth splitting arrow? And you even gave it to the descendant of the demonic god. You're really something. How would I know that he was the descendant of the demonic god? He said that he is an ordinary citizen of the demon world. After I checked him, I discovered that he does not have the slightest bit of cultivation. He is indeed an ordinary person. Who would have thought that the bloodline of such a talented person like the demon god is actually a cripple who cannot cultivate? Hong Tai Long argued. Yi Tiankong is a useless person who can't cultivate? Yu Qianqiu was stunned and he asked suspiciously, you're not trying to get out of this on purpose, are you? If Yi Tiankong was a cripple, how could he control the heaven and earth splitting arrow? How could he become the person who punishes on behalf of the heavens? If you're not trying to exonerate yourself, then you're really stupid. How could you believe such a lie? Hong Tai Long raised his hands that were chained. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. I naturally wouldn't believe it so easily. But what's strange is that the heaven and earth splitting arrow actually recognized him as its master. How can I not believe it? The decree I received was to find the owner of the heaven-splitting arrow society. How could I have known that the heaven and earth-splitting arrow would recognize a cripple who could not cultivate as its master? I don't even have a place to complain to. That's right. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. It was understandable that other people didn't know about the difficulties the divine arrow made, but he had experienced it himself. If the divine sword didn't recognize him as its master, Yi Tiankong wouldn't have been able to rely on the heaven and earth-splitting arrow to become the demon lord of 10,000 swords that shook the three realms. But after thinking about it, he felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, "Didn't you say that Yi Tiankong couldn't cultivate? Then how did he get such a high cultivation to strike fear into the hearts of the immortal realm and netherworld?" When he said this, Hong Tailong's face was filled with shame again. He stammered for a long time before he said, "When I came down from the immortal realm, I actually forgot to ask how I was supposed to go back. And Yi Tiankong's nonsense actually made me believe it. I mistakenly thought that my mission was to assist him in punishing on behalf of the heavens. Thus, I used the dragon race's divine dragon empowerment technique and transferred half of my cultivation to him, allowing him to reach the early stage of small god. At the same time, my cultivation dropped from the middle stage of small god to the late stage of small god. Otherwise, Jin Tai and Bai Qi wouldn't be my match." Divine dragon empowerment technique. You gave him half of your cultivation? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Just how good was this Yi Tiankong at deceiving people? To be able to deceive him into giving him half of his cultivation. For some reason, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a sense of sympathy for Yi Tian. After listening to Hong Tailong's story, why did he feel that this guy's style was somewhat similar to his own? How could there be a person who thought of himself as a swindler? After Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses, he coughed twice to cover up his awkwardness and said, "What realm were Jin Tai and Bai Qi's cultivation? Why couldn't the two of you defeat them with your early-stage small god cultivation?" At that time they had both stepped into the middle stage of small god. Their cultivation was a level higher than mine when we separated. Hong Tailong said with certainty, as if he wanted Yu Qianqiu to believe that this was the reason why he couldn't defeat the other party. He was still rather concerned about his reputation. Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully. The people of the three realms all said that Jin Tai, Bai Qi, the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, and the Divine Dragon's cultivation were all at the late stage of the Celestial Emperor realm. Actually, that wasn't the case at all. It looked like the rumors really couldn't be trusted. So the great formation of heaven and earth in the holy eastern lands and the demonic spirit immortal punishing formation here were all created by Yi Tiankong? Yu Qianqiu asked again. He had to find out how much of the story in those legends was exaggerated. He didn't want to become the demonic ghost region's torturer, but in reality he was just a tool for someone else. Yes. Those were all things that came along with the heaven and earth splitting arrow in the Transmission Jade Archive. Yi Tiankong had learned all of them from the Transmission Jade Archive. Hong Tailong sighed softly and said, "If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you wouldn't be able to believe how high Yi Tiankong's innate talent for cultivation is. And it's precisely because of this that I'm even more convinced of his identity as the heaven's torturer. I've studied the things in the Transmission Jade Archive for a long time, but I still couldn't make any headway. But in his hands it wasn't a difficult task at all. He could practically understand it with just one look. He's practically a genius." "Damn it. That's because you're stupid, alright? Otherwise you wouldn't have been tricked so easily." Yu Qianqiu clenched his fist and coughed. In his mind he was thinking about creating a few more great formations of heaven and earth and demonic spirit immortal punishing formation in the immortal realm, the netherworld or the devil realm. That would be fun. He then waved his hand and said, "Where's the Transmission Jade Archive? Take it out and let me have a look. Let me see if it's really as difficult as you said." "I don't have it anymore." Hong Tailong spread his hands and said, "I gave it to Yi Tiankong. After he understood it, he destroyed it." Seeing Yu Qianqiu looking at him suspiciously, Hong Tailong immediately assured him that he really didn't have it. "You wastrel." Yu Qianqiu pointed at him with a trembling hand. He didn't know what else to say. Something passed down from the coiling dragon god was gone just like that. The more he thought about it, the more pained he felt. He couldn't help but roar, "Damn it! That thing was mine, but you gave it to someone else and destroyed it. What crime do you deserve? You deserve to die 10,000 times over." Hong Tailong was stunned by Miao Yi's scolding. He said in shock, "That was something the coiling dragon ancestor bestowed to the heaven's torturer. What right do you have to say that it's yours? You foolish dragon. Yu Qianqiu pointed at him with a trembling finger for a long while. Finally, he managed to organize his words and shouted, "Don't you know that I've already met the coiling dragon god? Do you think I would come looking for you if I hadn't met the coiling dragon god? Damn it. I'm the true heaven's torturer. Those things were all given to me. Open your eyes and take a look at what this is." He casually took out the divine arrow and waved it in front of Hong Tailong's eyes. Heaven and earth splitting arrow? Hong Tailong muttered to himself. He was dumbfounded as he looked at the divine arrow. He could tell that the divine arrow had been confirmed as its owner from how lightly it was being held in Miao Yi's hand. Suddenly he opened his mouth, "Woo woo." Then he started to cry loudly. As he cried he kept shouting, "I was wrong. I deserve to die. I'm wrong. I deserve to die." The old shameless man started crying again. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He couldn't do anything to this old thing. After all, he was also lying to him. Just as he was about to put away the divine arrow, his gaze suddenly focused on the arrow. He suddenly recalled the conversation between the coiling dragon god and the demon god. The meaning in the legend of the coiling dragon god was very clear. Those things were indeed given to the demon god's descendants. In other words, it wasn't wrong for the divine arrow to recognize Yi Tiankong as its owner. Since that was the case, why didn't Miao Yi explain it to Hong Tailong? Miao Yi could tell that Hong Tailong's brain wasn't very bright. Otherwise he wouldn't have been tricked so easily. But why did the coiling dragon god choose such a person to do things for him? Could it be that the coiling dragon god really didn't have any subordinates he could use? If it wasn't for a friend suddenly popping out of nowhere and telling him about the demon realm, Hong Tailong probably wouldn't have gone to the demon realm and wouldn't have met Yi Tiankong. The item wouldn't have landed in Yi Tiankong's hands and wouldn't have been given to the demon god's descendants. Chapter 1171. However, the coiling dragon god had clearly told the demonic god that the heaven-splitting arrow was meant for his descendants. Yet, of all people he chose Yi Tiankong, who was unable to cultivate. Even though Yi Tiankong was very talented, he was still unable to cultivate. He remembered that the demonic god had said that this was a trap. Could there really be something fishy going on? Damn it. What the hell were these big shots up to? Yu Qianqiu looked at the heaven-splitting arrow in his hand and suddenly shivered. He felt as if he had fallen into some kind of trap. He began to consider whether or not he should keep the heaven-splitting arrow, lest he was used by others without even knowing it. However, it was a pity to abandon such a divine artifact. Yu Qianqiu kept it without hesitation. No matter what, it was better to keep a good treasure. Not only could it save his life at a critical moment, it could also prevent it from falling into the hands of others. All right. Don't cry. Since it's all in the past, let's forget about it. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, pretending to be magnanimous. I won't argue with you anymore. After all, you can't be blamed entirely. If you want to blame someone, blame Yi Tiankong for being too cunning. Speaking up to this point, his heart surged with a bunch of knots. Yi Tiankong created the demon domain, but he and his disciple helped him guard the demon domain and worked as torture envoys for such a long time. What a scam. Hong Tailong immediately stopped crying. He wiped away his tears and asked, "Then what about the transmission jade archive?" The fat child stared at his grandfather, dumbfounded. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. This was probably the first time he had seen his grandfather cry. "It's gone. What else can I do? If you don't have it, then don't use it." Although Yu Qianqiu was magnanimous, he still couldn't help but feel his heart ache. He asked in confusion, "Since Yi Tiankong was able to trick you to this extent, how did you know his identity?" He said it himself. Hong Tailong's eyes instantly blurred, and with a reminiscing expression he slowly said, "I don't know where Jin Tai and Bai Qi got the soul-transforming smoke from. Yi Tiankong and I never dreamed that they could actually get their hands on the soul-transforming smoke, so we fell into their trap. I'm afraid that the two of them think that we're dead for sure, but they don't know that my dragon race is immune to the soul-transforming smoke refined by the phoenix feather. The soul-transforming smoke has no effect on me, and Yi Tiankong was able to hold on for a period of time because of the dragon essence I poured into him, but he also knows that he won't be able to live for long. He made me suck in all the soul-dissolving smoke that Jin Tai and Bai Qi had set up. Then he made me spit it out at the immortal ascension stage in the human world. He used the soul-dissolving smoke to set up a grand array to prevent people from the immortal world from coming to the human world again." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and asked quietly, "The array formation at the seal of the demon realm must have been set up by him, right? What's your intention?" He said that Demon Lord Three Knights had once said that he had thrown a demonic book into this human world, hoping that someone would be able to learn the demonic art and open up the passageway to the demon realm. Hong Tailong shook his head slightly and smiled bitterly. Yi Tiankong said that he had fallen in love with this world, but he couldn't ruin his father's plans. So he set up a grand array that could seal the demon realm once again. If he could block it, then he'd block it. If he couldn't, then he'd just let it go. It would be up to heaven's will. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He had experienced that scene, so he knew that Hong Tailong wasn't lying. Yi Tiankong didn't lie to Hong Tailong either. After Yan Zhuixing opened up the passageway to the demon realm, the grand array did seal the passageway to the demon realm once again. Hong Tailong continued to narrate, I said that I wanted to take revenge for him, but he said that I wasn't a match for those two cunning fellows, so he didn't want anything to happen to me. I also asked him why he didn't destroy the immortal ascension stage and seal the passageway to the netherworld. That way, no one from the netherworld or immortal realm would be able to come to this human world. He didn't tell me the answer at first. It was only when he tricked me here and used my dragon binding rope to bind me that he told me the reason. Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched slightly. Two streams of clear tears silently slid down Hong Tailong's face as he sobbed. After he revealed his identity, he said that he was very happy to have met me. It was the happiest time in his life. I was the one who allowed him to realize his dream of flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth. He was willing to die for this once in his life. He didn't care how long it would be as long as he was happy. He didn't feel pain because he was poisoned by the soul-transforming smoke. After all, he had changed his fate before. He said that it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to destroy the immortal ascension stage, and it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to seal the netherworld. Similarly, it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to completely annihilate Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was that he couldn't do it because he wasn't the person I was looking for. Because he didn't know what the mission of punishing on behalf of the heavens was. He just wanted to have a good time in this world and he didn't want to make any big changes. The mission of punishing on behalf of the heavens should belong to whoever it belonged to. He was just borrowing it for fun. When he couldn't play anymore, he naturally had to return it to someone else. He said that he really liked this world and it was much friendlier than the devil realm. He really didn't want to see this world being ravaged by outsiders, so he created the demon realm. If one day someone wanted to destroy the peace here, he wanted to do his best to give this world a little bit of protection so that it wouldn't be easily ruined by outsiders. At least he wouldn't have come in vain, and this world would give him a little bit of happiness in return. He was also afraid that the combination of the divine arrow and the demon and ghost immortal execution formation would be too powerful and completely destroy this world, so he deliberately left one of the 10,000 swords that contained the soul of the great god Yi in the heaven and earth formation. He said that if the person who punishes on behalf of the heavens is destined, then that person will find me sooner or later. When that time comes, he wants me to tell that person that there is another divine sword in a lake in the heaven and earth formation, and let him find it. If he finds it, then it will be returned to its original owner, but if he can't find it, then he can't be blamed. The remaining 9,999 swords are in the center of the lake outside, and have become the formation's eye of the demon realm. If I think of a way to take them out from the stone pillar, the formation will naturally be broken. As for the Jade Archive, there are many things in it that are too disadvantageous to the people of the Devil Realm. He and Demon King Three Knights are father and son, and he doesn't want to see someone kill his father one day, so he confiscated it. He said that if that person can enter the heaven and earth formation, then he must have grasped the method to control the purple flames. As for the dragon binding rope that trapped me, he used the energy of the purple flames of the mortal realm to set up a formation to control it. If he can break the heaven and earth formation, then he can similarly release me. When that time comes, everything will be dust to dust and dust to dust. He told me to tell that person that he only borrowed it for fun, and that he really doesn't owe that person anything. After he said all this, he used the Divine Dragon's empowerment art to return the cultivation I gave him to me, and then, right before my eyes, smiling, he sank into this river of lava, instantly turning into ashes, never to be seen again. At this point, Hong Tailong's tears were already streaming down his aged face, and he was sobbing uncontrollably. Behind him, the bare-bottomed child also started sobbing. It was unknown whether it was because he had truly understood the story and felt sad, or because he was touched by the sight of his grandfather crying and cried along with him. After listening to Hong Tailong's story, Yu Qianqiu stood in silence for a long time. Then he let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that such a story would be hidden behind this torturous matter. He asked himself honestly, as the person who impersonated the punishment on behalf of the heavens, he had no reason to blame anyone. Looking at Hong Tai-long, who had fallen in love with him, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. He could tell that Yi Tiankong wasn't a bad person, and he could also tell that Yi Tiankong had treated Hong Tai-long very well in the past. Furthermore, the happy times that Yi Tiankong had gone through must have been one of Hong Tai-long's happiest times. Although Hong Tai-long had cursed Yi Tiankong as a bastard, saying that he had lied to him, he couldn't hide the fact that their true friendship was right before his eyes. Back then, it wasn't that Hong Tai-long didn't suspect Yi Tiankong. It was most likely because he was willing to be kept in the dark and foolishly fooled around with Yi Tiankong. After all, to some people with true temperament, sometimes friendship or love was far higher than the endless pursuit of profound cultivation. For example, when Lanfeng's love for Liu Yanqing was unwavering until death. I've already broken the heaven and earth great array. I've also found the divine sword that was abandoned at the Moonlight Lake. The heaven and earth splitting arrow has also been restored to its original state. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two golden chains in Hong Tai-long's hands and said indifferently, Yi Tiankong is right. I can indeed control the energy of the purple flames. Perhaps I can help you undo the shackles of the dragon binding rope. Do you want to continue staying here and grieve, or do you want to leave with me? Hong Tai-long hurriedly wiped away his tears. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, he said weakly, Did Ancestor Coiling Dragon agree to let me out? *CK. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He immediately realized that he had fallen into this old dragon's trap. Hong Tai-long was pretending to be pitiful, but in reality he mistakenly believed that Yu Qianqiu was really related to Ancestor Coiling Dragon. After beating around the bush for so long, he wanted to know Ancestor Coiling Dragon's attitude. He was afraid that he would be punished for failing to complete Ancestor Coiling Dragon's mission. Damn it, you're dishonest. You used to have fun with Yi Tiankong, but now you're afraid? Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said, Let me ask you, why did Ancestor Coiling Dragon look for you to do this mission? Hong Tai-long was stunned. He didn't know what he meant by this question. He hesitantly replied, I don't know either. This is the first time Ancestor Coiling Dragon has summoned me. It's also the first time I've directly accepted a mission from Ancestor Coiling Dragon. I don't know why. First time? Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed. It looked like Coiling Dragon had purposely chosen this guy. This matter might really be as the demonic god had said, a well-planned trap. Yu Qianqiu's eyes darted around. He stared at Hong Tai-long and chuckled coldly. Tell me honestly, did you really forget to ask about the way back to the immortal realm? Or did you actually know the way back, but because you went overboard and were afraid that you wouldn't be able to answer to Ancestor Coiling Dragon, you had a guilty conscience and discussed with Yi Tiankong to trap yourself here? Hong Tai-long's expression changed slightly and he said solemnly, How is that possible? Don't try that in front of me. No one can lie in front of me and get away with it. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted Hong Tai-long's words. He sneered and said, Damn it. You and Yi Tiankong are simply bad partners who work hand in glove with each other. Yi Tiankong has arranged everything flawlessly. Once he's done enjoying himself, how could he forget about you, the accomplice of a villain? If he didn't help you calculate a way to answer to the mission, he probably wouldn't have died a happy death. You wouldn't have stayed here obediently for so many years, right? If you had nothing better to do, wouldn't you at least vent your anger by shouting a few times? Chapter 1172. How could Hong Tai-long admit to such a heavy crime? He shook his head and denied it, saying that Yu Qianqiu had wrongly accused him. In the end, Yu Qianqiu threw out a sentence and Hong Tai-long immediately admitted defeat. Fine. You don't want to admit it? I'll go argue with Coiling Dragon God and ask him to clarify this matter with you. Yu Qianqiu turned around and was about to leave. Hong Tai-long panicked on the spot. He grabbed his shoulder and turned around, smiling apologetically. We can talk about it slowly. There's no need to trouble old Ancestor. Some things have happened too long ago, I might have remembered it wrongly. Let me think about it. Yu Qianqiu sneered and asked coldly, Then did you remember anything? Hong Tai-long revealed a look of contemplation and said slowly, Now that you've reminded me, I do remember something. There seem to be two ways to return to the divine realm. I heard that old Ancestor Coiling Dragon opened up a space in the Netherworld, which is the Netherworld Divine Manor. There's a secret passage that leads to the divine realm, directly to the Dragon Clan's Divine Dragon Mountain in the divine realm. Only people of my Dragon Clan can find it. Also, when the Netherworld River Black Carp of the Netherworld River aquatic race successfully leaps through the Dragon's Gate, our dragon clan will send a Pegasus carriage down to the divine realm. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Putting aside the passage to the divine realm in the netherworld divine manner, he had personally experienced the black carp leaping through the dragon's gate and the Pegasus carriage. He had even sat on the Pegasus carriage, but he never dreamed that it led to the divine realm. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to the divine realm to take a look. After feeling regretful, he came back to his senses and asked again, "That's it? Tell me honestly how much of what you said before was false. Squeeze it dry and say it again. Otherwise you'll have to explain to Coiling Dragon God yourself." Hong Tailong immediately begged on the verge of tears, "Everything else I've said is the truth. Just like what you've said, I'm afraid that I won't be able to answer to the old ancestor, so I discussed with Yi Tiankong and purposely got trapped here so that I can answer when I'm found. Otherwise, do you think I like being trapped here?" Even if Patriarch Coiling Dragon were to interrogate him directly, the result would still be the same. In that case, let Patriarch Coiling Dragon come and interrogate him face to face. Yu Qianqiu smirked as he flew along the green flames spewing out from the green lotus. Hong Tailong was dumbfounded on the spot. Then he started pounding his chest and stamping his feet in apprehension. He looked as if he was regretting that a disaster was about to befall him. Suddenly he raised his head and saw Yu Qianqiu flashing back. He was stunned. Yu Qianqiu looked at him for a while, then frowned and said in a deep voice, "After thinking about it, I still feel that I should give you a chance to redeem yourself. Besides, it's not easy to meet the Coiling Dragon God. I wonder if you're willing to cherish this opportunity?" The reason why he had left earlier was actually to trick Hong Tailong. Reality proved that Hong Tailong really did not hide anything. Otherwise he would have definitely called out to him. Thus he had turned back. Hong Tailong wasn't really an idiot. He more or less saw through his intentions. He immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I'm willing. I wonder how I can redeem myself?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him with an awe-inspiring gaze. His expression suddenly turned solemn as he said word by word, "Complete your unfinished mission and help me mete out punishment on behalf of the heavens. After that, other than yourself, no one will mention the matter of you colluding with Yi Tiankong." He wanted him to work for him. Hong Tailong cupped his fists and said with a bitter expression, "I dare not to obey. I hope you remember your words. I'll help you get out of trouble right now." Yu Qianqiu didn't have the time to continue arguing with him. He directly dived into the boiling lava. Hong Tailong was stunned for a moment before he also jumped in. The bare-bottomed child silently sat on the green lotus and looked at the surging lava river. No one knew what he had understood or what he had thought of. At the bottom of the surging lava river that was several hundred meters deep, there was a space shrouded in purple mist. Within it, there was a transparent purple crystal that was the size of a small hill. 2 golden chains were pressed underneath it. Yu Qianqiu extended his palm to sense it. He was instantly shocked. So this entire purple crystal was actually condensed from the purple fire element. How much purple fire element was needed to condense such a large crystal? The entire purple crystal seemed to be secretly communicating with the entire heaven and earth. It was firmly embedded there. In order to move it, one would undoubtedly need a power that could shake the entire world. No wonder it could suppress Hong Tailong and prevent him from escaping. Yu Qianqiu, who was pushing his palm forward, slowly closed his eyes. The hazy purple mist began to slowly revolve and spread in all directions, silently returning to the heaven and earth. Purple mist rapidly rose from the purple crystal, and at the same time, it was also slowly shrinking. Half a day later, the entire purple crystal had completely dissipated. Hong Tailong's arms trembled, and the golden chains were controlled by him like they were his fingers. They quickly fell from his wrists and he opened his mouth and directly sucked them into his stomach. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you eat it into your stomach?" Hong Tailong looked at his arms that had regained their freedom and laughed heartily. "There's a space in the stomach of my dragon race. It's just like your storage space. It's used to store things. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu looked at his stomach and felt a chill. He waved his hand and said, "Since you're already free, come with me." Hong Tailong was in high spirits. He readily agreed. He then asked curiously, "Where are we going?" The boiling lava flowed in the sky, but not a single drop fell. It illuminated the underground space with a red light. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and narrowed his eyes. Jintai and Bai Qi have opened the seal to the demonic realm. Now, Demon Lord 3 Knights is leading the demonic realm army to sweep across the immortal and netherworld. I've personally witnessed Demon Lord 3 Knights slaughtering over 200 million immortal realm cultivators. They don't even want to let the human realm off. Previously, it was precisely because the demonic realm army attacked that I activated the demonic ghost immortal punishing formation to deal with them. They probably won't barge into the human realm before they understand the situation here. Jin Tai and Bai Qi opened the passage to the demonic realm. Hong Tailong couldn't help but be shocked. His red brows furrowed. He recalled that Demon Lord 3 Knights was Yi Tiankong's father. He then asked in a heavy voice, "You mean you want me to help you deal with the demonic realm army?" "I don't mind telling you the truth. I've been to the demonic realm before. I have the strength to fight against Demon Lord 3 Knights' great demon king, but I'm definitely not Demon Lord 3 Knights' opponent." Yu Qianzhou shook his head. "We'll deal with Demon Lord 3 Knights one step at a time. What we need to do now is to stop them from harassing this human realm. The passage to the demonic realm is still sealed, but we need to destroy the immortal ascension stage to cut off any possibility of them barging in. Most importantly, we need to find a way to seal the passage to the netherworld and completely cut off any possibility of them entering this human realm. You should know how to seal the passage between the two realms, right? It's a pity I don't know sealing techniques." Hong Tailong stared at the slightly disappointed Yu Qianzhou with a burning gaze. "But I know a way to block the passage between the two realms. If someone uses a divine artifact to guard the entrance of the passage, it can also prevent people from the two realms from passing through." Yu Qianzhou's gaze slowly met his. He said in a heavy voice, "You mean you want me to use the heaven and earth splitting arrow to block the passage between the two realms?" "That's right." Hong Tailong nodded his head firmly. "The heaven and earth splitting arrow isn't an ordinary divine artifact. If it hasn't recognized a master, blocking the passage between the two realms would still be dangerous. But it has already recognized a master. As long as we use it to block the passage between the two realms, no one will be able to move it. Unless you die." Yu Qianzhou pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "For the peace of this human realm, I've spared no expense and put in a lot of effort. Now that things have come to this, how can I let it repeat the mistakes of the past because of my selfishness? Looks like this is the only way." As he spoke, he opened his eyes wide and shouted, "All right. Let's do it. Use the divine arrow to block it." He was actually willing to give up on the heaven and earth splitting arrow. Hong Tailong was instantly filled with deep veneration. This kind of person didn't make him work for nothing. However, he had thought too highly of Yu Qianzhou. Actually, he didn't want to give up on such a divine artifact, but the situation forced him to do so for the time being. In addition, he had always suspected that there was some kind of conspiracy on this divine arrow, so he was in a state of anxiety. Besides, he believed that once he found a way to seal it, he would still be able to retrieve the divine arrow. Yu Qianzhou had already waved his hand, and the surrounding scenery changed continuously. When the scenery stabilized, the two of them had already arrived at the entrance to the netherworld. When Hong Tailong saw the sea of netherworld flames in front of him, he immediately turned around to take a look. The huge netherworld iron steel inscriptions and that huge door made him understand that they had already arrived at the entrance to the netherworld. He suddenly stared at Yu Qianzhou and cried out in shock, "You have a star bead? Nonsense. I'm the one who executes punishment on behalf of the heavens. What's so strange about having a star bead?" Yu Qianzhou revealed a very disdainful expression. He had only revealed a little bit of his skill to make Hong Tailong follow him wholeheartedly. He had originally wanted to show off a little, but he didn't expect the other party to be so knowledgeable, saving him a lot of effort to explain. He casually took out the heaven and earth splitting arrow and held it in his hand, stroking it regretfully. Then he resolutely and forcefully pushed open the door to the netherworld. Sharp eerie winds instantly gushed out like ink. The divine arrow entered the crack of the door and he shouted, "Expand!" The entire divine arrow immediately shone with golden light, and it rapidly grew longer and thicker, expanding the door to the netherworld. Only when half of the arrow was inside and the other half was outside, did the eerie winds cease. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou had really given up on the heaven and earth splitting arrow, Hong Tailong was incomparably moved. Previously, he suspected that Yu Qianzhou would be reluctant to part with the heaven and earth splitting arrow and had been waiting to see. At this moment, he instantly let go of his pride as a dragon and willingly submitted to Yu Qianzhou. Hong Tailong took a deep breath and said, "I've heard a legend in the immortal realm. This door to the netherworld is extraordinary. It's easy to shatter, but it's hard to merge again. If someone can use the true Samadhi fire to completely erase the various forms of life on the door and merge the entire door together seamlessly, separating the yin and yang, then the yin and yang will be severed. The entire door to the netherworld will disappear, and the netherworld passage will also disappear completely. There's such a thing? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Then he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He stretched out his palm and green, black and purple flames appeared in his palm at the same time. He said, I can control these 3 mystical flames, but my cultivation is too low. I can't merge them into the true Samadhi fire. Otherwise, so what if I completely sever the yin and yang realms? Chapter 1173. Hong Tailong was speechless with his mouth slightly agape. He was wondering how many things this guy had hidden on him. How could he have anything he wanted? Furthermore, each and every one of them was unimaginable. As expected of the executioner of heaven, he was blessed by the heavens. Yu Qianqiu retracted the flames in his palm and closed his mouth. Since you possess 3 types of true fire, you must be proficient in the art of controlling fire. It won't be difficult to fuse them into the Samadhi true fire. Hong Tailong smiled faintly and said, I can use the divine dragon empowerment technique to transfer a portion of my cultivation to you so that you have enough cultivation to fuse with the Samadhi true fire. However, it will take a long time. Without at least half a year of comprehension, it will be difficult to fuse them. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up at first, but he shook his head with a bitter smile and said, Half a year? I can do many things in this half a year. Now is not the time. Thank you for your kind intentions, but this is the time where I can use you. Preserving your cultivation is more useful to me. Seeing that he was able to resist the temptation of transferring his cultivation, Hong Tailong fell into deep thought as if he was hesitating about something. After a long time he slowly said, There is another way. That is to devour the fire spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Let the fire spirit's innate comprehension of fire fuse with you and you can quickly fuse them into the Samadhi true fire. Fire spirit? Yu Qianqiu mocked himself. Let alone devouring the fire spirit, I can even devour the 5 spirits of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Hong Tailong was stunned and said, What do you mean? I know all of the 5 elements control arts. What do you mean? Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. There was not a trace of pride on his face. What? Hong Tailong was shocked again and was stunned for a long time before he said anxiously, You know all of the 5 elements control arts? How is that possible? How can a person cultivate all of the 5 elements control arts? What happens when the 5 elements clash? Don't you feel uncomfortable? You should have told me this earlier. I have already practiced it. What's the use of saying it now? Besides, I don't feel uncomfortable at all. Yu Qianqiu shrugged. Then he stretched out his left hand and a water dragon appeared. It swam 1 round and ran back. With a stretch of his right hand, an earth dragon emerged and circled around before returning. Following that, a golden dragon appeared from each of his hands, and he kissed the greenwood elemental dragon. After separating, he retracted his hands. His shy and bashful look after having an affair was simply vivid and lifelike. Hong Tailong was instantly dumbfounded. The corners of his mouth twitched incessantly, and he screamed madly in his heart that there was no justice in this world. This guy's body is simply a treasure trove, as expected of the person who executes punishments on behalf of the heavens. However, can a person who executes punishments on behalf of the heavens be so extravagant and unscrupulous? He was simply a person who was blessed by the heavens. If they were in the god realm, they would be envied to death. Hong Tailong no longer had any doubts about Yu Qianqiu's identity as the heavens executioner. He dared to pat his chest and guarantee that if he were to admit the wrong person again, he would dig his eyeballs out and feed them to the dogs. Let's go. We'll go to the dense fog forest and completely destroy the immortal ascension stage. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to wave his hand and teleport away, Hong Tailong held his hand and sighed, I know where the fire spirit is. Yu Qianqiu was startled. His eyes quickly lit up as he asked, Where? You've already met him twice. Hong Tailong retracted his hand and sighed. Yu Qianqiu was instantly confused. Hong Tailong had been trapped for so many years, and this was the first time he had come out with him. However, he said that he had already met him twice. Just who could it be? Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. He recalled the kid who slept on the green lotus with his buttocks naked. He said in astonishment, Could it be that kid in the green fire? Apart from that kid, he really couldn't think of anyone else that Hong Tailong knew he had met twice. Furthermore, that kid was actually sleeping in the fire. his background was truly unimaginable. So, this is all fate. Only now do I understand why someone inexplicably gave me 9 precious green lotus fire seeds when I was about to leave the Divine Dragon Mountain. Feelings are all prepared for you. It's all destined and arranged. Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head with a bitter smile. That's right, it's Qing'er. Originally, the 9-petaled green lotus could nurture 9 fire spirits. Unfortunately, you stole the green fire at the critical moment of nurturing them. Hence, 8 of them died prematurely. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath. Although that fat kid was crafty, he really couldn't do anything to him after he devoured him. He originally thought it was Hong Tailong's grandson. He didn't expect it to be a fire spirit. After a moment of silence, he shook his head with a bitter smile. Then forget it. I really can't do it. After all, that kid is not an outsider. It's nothing. I won't erase his consciousness. I will extract it and store it. In the future, when I have the chance to return to the divine world, I will find a way to find the green lotus fire seed for him to nurture again. Hong Tailong's smile was a little unnatural. It's just that it will take many years for him to be reborn. It will be hard on him. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and frowned for a while. Let's talk about this later. Let's go destroy the immortal ascension stage first. With a wave of his hand, the two disappeared through the exit of the netherworld. Meanwhile, the ball of black light that escaped from the entrance of the netherworld passed through the netherworld and directly returned to the immortal world's mystic immortal city. Demon Lord Three Knights, who occupied the newly constructed branch of Unrequited Love Palace, was sitting high above. Currently, almost no one in the netherworld or immortal world dared to resist the demon world's army. Wang Qing and his son had also escaped into the netherworld god palace. Below, a few great demon kings were discussing how to provoke the netherworld god palace. At this moment, a cry of alarm came from outside. Everyone turned to look and saw a ball of black light charging into the main hall and floating in the air. A majestic and ancient aura immediately filled the entire main hall, shocking everyone's soul. The few great demon kings and Eunuch Li, who was standing beside Demon Lord Three Knights, all knelt down on one knee in shock. They shouted in unison, "Greetings, Lord Demon God." The Demon Dao generals who came to capture the intruder and the Demon Dao generals sitting inside the main hall all trembled. Jin Tai was among them while Bai Qi had gone to the netherworld. Everyone didn't expect this ball of black light to be the arrival of the legendary demon god. They immediately knelt down and shouted in worship. Demon Lord Three Knights, on the other hand, had never come into contact with a demon god before. When he saw everyone's actions, he sucked in a cold breath. Just as he got up and was about to kneel down, he heard Yan Zhuixing's urgent voice. "Demon Lord, save me." Everyone was stunned and looked up. A red light flashed in Demon Lord Three Knights' eyes. When he saw Yan Zhuixing's nascent soul, he immediately stopped kneeling and said in shock, "Yan Zhuixing, how did you become like this? Where's your corporeal body?" The others also stood up in shock, feeling like they had knelt for nothing. Yan Zhuixing, who was in the black light, immediately recounted the tragic experience of him, Li Tian, and the other 3 great demon kings barging into the human world. In the end, he emphasized with grief and indignation, "If it wasn't for Lord Demon God breaking through the void and rushing over from the divine world to save me, I would have been like great demon king Li Tian and the others, turning into ashes. Demon Lord, please find me a suitable corporeal body." Everyone sucked in a cold breath. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. He actually hit such a terrifying killing move and instantly killed everyone. What was even more shocking was that in order to save Yan Zhuixing, Lord Demon God had instantly broken through the void from the divine world and descended into the human world. Just how powerful was his cultivation? It was simply unimaginable. Many people's gazes were filled with extreme reverence. There was even reverence in them. They couldn't wait to see Lord Demon God's glory with their own eyes. Demon Lord Three Knights clenched his fists tightly. He was actually trembling in excitement because of Demon God's divine ability. He was also honored by the glory of his ancestors. In the past, there were actually many people who doubted whether Yan Zhuixing was Lord Demon God's personal disciple. They were very suspicious about him becoming the Vice Palace Master of Demon Palace and felt that it was impossible. Why would Lord Demon God choose a personal disciple from the divine world to the human world? However, everything that happened in front of them made everyone dispel their suspicions. They were extremely respectful to Yan Zhuixing and didn't dare to underestimate him in the slightest. Demon Lord Three Knights felt that it was a great pity that he couldn't see his ancestors' shocking glory with his own eyes. That was the god he had heard everyone around him praise since he was young. It was the source of his pride. Lord Demon God's glorious achievements had already been engraved in his bones. He had always wanted to repeat that proud legend. He calmed his excited emotions and slowly let out a breath. He tilted his head slightly to look at Eunuch Lee beside him. Eunuch Lee nodded in understanding. His gaze quickly swept across the crowd and finally landed on a guard at the door. He discovered that his cultivation and physical body matched Yan Zhuixing's nascent soul. Suddenly he grabbed at the air and a gust of wind blew in the hall. That person was sucked over without any ability to resist. After being grabbed by the shoulder by Eunuch Lee, he immediately understood that he was about to be possessed. He immediately cried out, "Demon Lord, spare me! Demon Lord!" Before he finished speaking, Eunuch Lee had already slapped his head. Several white halos of light repeatedly expelled the dark red blood mist from his body. Suddenly the white halos of light quickly retracted. Eunuch Lee pinched open the guard's mouth and twisted it towards the black light that was enveloping Yan Zhuixing's nascent soul in the air. With a whoosh, the black light directly entered the person's mouth. That person's abdomen swelled and squirmed, and then there was no more movement. Eunuch Lee casually picked up that person by the waist. Without saying anything to anyone, he turned around and went to the back hall. After everyone present witnessed this scene, they all kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say anything. Demon Lord Three Knights' gaze swept across the hall and landed on Jin Tai's somewhat strange expression. He shook off his scarlet cloak and sat down. He coldly asked, "Jin Tai, what's going on in that human realm? I heard that you and Bai Qi joined hands to fight a person called the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords. You even suffered a great loss. I believe you know the situation there better than us." Jin Tai hurriedly walked to the center and bowed. "Demon Lord, what's going on in that human realm?" Back then, that Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords appeared strangely. This subordinate even suspected that he was someone from the demon realm. From what Vice Palace Lord said, it was likely that the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords' heaven and earth splitting arrow that heavily injured them. I didn't expect that it had already fallen into Yu Qianqiu's hands. However, the heaven and earth splitting arrow back then didn't seem to have such great power. This subordinate is also a little confused. Chapter 1174. Yu Qianqiu and Hong Tailong's figures suddenly appeared outside the dense fog forest where the colorful fog lingered. The two of them looked around and didn't find any movement. Their gazes landed on the gorgeous fog with different expressions. In reality, it was very unlikely that anyone would come here. Although the colorful fog was mesmerizing, there was no need for ordinary people to set foot in this barren land. Hong Tailong suddenly turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu, sighing, "Star bead is really magical. It can actually go wherever you want to go. No matter how far the distance is, it's all in the blink of an eye. It's not as magical as you think. You have to set the coordinates beforehand." Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment. He turned around and asked curiously, "How much do you know about star bead?" He originally thought that the other party understood star bead very well. In the end, the other party's words made him suspicious. "I'm not too sure. I've only heard rumors that it's a divine artifact refined by Tao. Every bead might have different functions, but those who can use star bead are people who can inherit Tao." Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated gaze. There was also some envy in it. Yu Qianqiu smiled disapprovingly. He didn't even know who Tao was, let alone inheriting Tao. Just the star bead that he knew had already changed owners 3 times. First, it landed in by Changchun's hands. Then it landed in by Sujin's hands. Finally he picked it up. It had nothing to do with inheriting Tao. However, he only kept these words in his heart. He wouldn't tell Hong Tailong. However, he was still rather interested in that mysterious Tao. He asked, "Who exactly is that Tao? I've heard people mentioning it several times, but they didn't mention it in detail. Can you tell me about it?" Hong Tailong shook his head and said, "I've only heard of it. I've never seen it. It seems that only a few people have seen it. However, my dragon race and phoenix race have always obeyed him. Damn it. Seems like experts like to play mysterious." Yu Qianqiu curled his lips in disdain and looked at the dense fog forest again. "What do we do now?" Hong Tailong looked at the 7-colored fog with a perplexed expression. Then he said decisively, "Go in. First, I'll destroy the immortal ascension stage and naturally cut off the connection between the immortal world and the human world. Then I'll take the soul-forming smoke." "All right." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and the two of them disappeared. In the blink of an eye they reappeared in the golden square. The moment Hong Tai-long landed on the ground, he scanned his surroundings. Then a red light erupted from his body and soared into the sky. His astonishing aura forced Yu Qianqiu to quickly move far away to observe. Roar. A resounding and vigorous dragon roar resounded throughout the world, shaking the entire basin and the golden plaza. The rainbow-colored clouds in the surroundings began to surge. After the red light that pierced through the heavens and the earth vanished, a 200 zhang long red dragon stretched out its claws. Its imposing aura was unstoppable. After its body, which was covered in red scales, curled up and swam back, the arrogant dragon shows remorse suddenly raised a gust of wind and plunged down. Boom. The altar in the center of the golden plaza was smashed deep into the ground. Then the huge red dragon rapidly circled around the huge basin. The huge dragon's fangs opened its mouth and sucked in crazily. All the gold bricks, gold nuggets, gold pillars and other gold objects on the golden plaza were sucked into its stomach in just a short while. The entire dazzling golden plaza immediately became a scene of devastation. Then the huge red dragon shook its head and tail at lightning speed, crazily crashing into the surrounding mountains and basins. Rumble. Amidst the rumbling sounds, Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly dodged to the sky to observe the situation. He saw that the huge basin below had completely collapsed in just a moment's time. Everything had been razed to the ground. The rainbow-colored fog that had gathered in the surroundings had also lost its restraints and started to disperse with the wind. Oh! The dragon roared once again. The huge red dragon soared into the sky and looked down at the vast land. Looking at the huge dragon beside him with its 4 claws wide open and its long body wriggling with the sound of wind and thunder, Yu Qianqiu was so excited that he actually dodged and stood on the huge dragon's ferocious head. He stood between the 2 antlers with his hands clasped behind his back. A feeling of arrogance welled up in him. The huge dragon's red eyes turned to look at him. It did not show any displeasure. Instead, it said in a deep rumbling voice, "You have the star bead. Are you afraid of the soul-transforming smoke?" "No." Yu Qianqiu shook his head forcefully. "Then stand still. I'm going to take this soul-transforming smoke. I can't let it wreak havoc on the world." Oh! The dragon roared angrily in the sky. The huge red scales on its body slightly opened up. Its aura surged up and down its body. Suddenly the wind and clouds surged. The huge dragon opened its fangs and swooped down. The vast land was suddenly swept up by a gust of wind. A strong suction force carried the rainbow-colored fog into the huge dragon's mouth like a rainbow. The huge dragon soared into the sky and danced around, chasing after the scattered rainbow-colored fog. After sweeping away all the rainbow-colored fog, the huge dragon shook its head and waved its tail as it soared into the sky. After circling around its surroundings once, another resounding dragon roar shook the heavens and the earth. Without any hesitation, it directly rode the wind and climbed the clouds, flying across the sky towards the horizon. Dragon's roar of the 9 heavens changes. Hong Tai-long might have been trapped underground for a long time. It had been a long time since he indulged himself in the sky. From time to time, he would let out a deafening roar to vent his emotions. Yu Qianqiu expressed his understanding. He did not stop Hong Tai-long and allowed him to soar into the sky. Meanwhile, he was also enjoying the legendary feeling of riding a dragon. No matter how fierce the wind blew against him, his green robe fluttered in the sky. He felt that his life was not in vain. However, it was, after all, a huge fellow flying in the sky. Coupled with Hong Tai-long's deafening roars from time to time, it was hard for the mortals on the ground not to notice it. However, no one could see the tiny Yu Qianqiu standing on the dragon's head. "Look, what's that in the sky? Divine dragon. It's a divine dragon. It's a divine dragon. Everyone look, it's a divine dragon." Passing through the borders of Wuxia, the mortals on the ground raised their heads and pointed at the sky. Everyone who could walk rushed out of their houses or onto the streets, pointing at the sky. Hong Tai-long seemed to enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention and admiration again. It was as if he had found the supreme glory that belonged to the dragon race. He intentionally slowed down his flying speed and roared even more frequently, as if he was afraid that others could not see him. When he saw a city with many people, he would even fly a few rounds in the sky to show off, flying towards the most crowded places. Yu Qianqiu did not know whether to laugh or cry. This Hong Tai-long was old, but he was still a flirtatious dragon. If he had known earlier, he would have dragged some people to see the scene of him being imprisoned. In the sky above Huaxia's capital city, A few dragon roars shook the entire city. In the blink of an eye, the streets were filled with people, pointing at the dragon flying in the sky. Endless sounds of astonishment and commotion rose and fell. In the palace, Shi Wenguang and the officials were discussing matters when they suddenly heard the shocking dragon roar. Another guard ran over to report that there was a dragon flying in the sky. Shi Wenguang and the officials immediately ran out to watch the commotion. The imperial concubines of the imperial concubines also stood outside and looked up at the sky. In the imperial preceptor Yongzhen's residence, a stream of light shot into the sky. Shi Xiaotian stood tall in the sky, looking at the dragon flying in circles in front of him. Other than shock, he was also on high alert. He vaguely realized that there was someone standing on the dragon's head. When Hong Tailong's vanity was satisfied and he left, Shi Xiaotian suddenly realized that the person riding on the dragon was actually Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, also noticed him. He nodded at him and smiled. The dragon instantly flew past the petrified Shi Xiaotian. Shi Xiaotian was startled awake by the strong wind and immediately shouted, "Boss!" He quickly chased after him. Yu Qianqiu turned to look at him and waved his hand with a warm smile, indicating for him to go back. He then turned back and scolded softly, "Hong Tailong, have you had enough of being coquettish? If someone familiar sees you, they would think that I like to show off. I've only come out for a breath of fresh air after over 100,000 years. I've lost my composure. Please forgive me." Hong Tailong chuckled. With a shake of his body, he quickly adjusted his direction and increased his speed, flying straight for the demon region. How could Shi Xiaotian catch up to Hong Tailong's flying speed? Seeing Yu Qianqiu riding the dragon into the horizon, he couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. A feeling of helplessness welled up in his heart as he stopped in the sky. His face was filled with desolation. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Boss would be able to ride a dragon and fly in the sky. Every time he saw Boss would give him a surprise that made him envious. Boss's level was getting higher and higher, and he was falling further and further behind. To be honest, the life that Yu Qianqiu had displayed was the cultivation life that Shi Xiaotian had yearned for a long time. Only by cultivating like this could one not cultivate in vain. He had always desired this, but it was a pity that Boss did not bring him along, leaving him with endless melancholy and grief. However, Shi Xiaotian was inexperienced, so how could he know the dangers behind this glory? Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had purposely pulled Shi Xiaotian out of danger because of their friendship. Humans were always like this. What they could not obtain was what they desired the most. They would often neglect the beauty around them. Not long after the depressed Shi Xiaotian returned to the imperial preceptor Yongzhen's residence, his father Shi Wenguang hurriedly rushed over. He pulled Shi Xiaotian aside and asked anxiously, "Was that a divine dragon flying in the sky just now? Was it a divine dragon? Did I see wrongly?" The shock on his face had yet to fade. He had purposely come over to seek confirmation. Shi Xiaotian sighed and slowly sat on the spacious armchair. With a desolate smile, he said, "Yes. The one riding the divine dragon was OL. Mr. Yu?" "It's Mr. Yu?" Shi Wenguang exclaimed. His face was filled with envy as he shook his head and sighed. After a long time he said, "Riding the divine dragon to fly in the sky. Mr. Yu is really a godly person. Why didn't you invite him over?" Wanting to see Yu Qianqiu was a pretense. In fact, he did not like to see Yu Qianqiu at all. This was because he was used to being an emperor and was used to being high and mighty. He was a little conflicted about bowing to others. In fact, he really wanted to see the legendary divine dragon up close. Mr. Yu Qianqiu has other matters to attend to, so it's inconvenient for him to come. Shi Xiaotian squeezed out a smile and said, "Father, you should go back to handle the affairs of the country. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion." Shi Wenguang sighed and left, leaving Shi Xiaotian paralyzed on the armchair. In his mind, he recalled the awe-inspiring scene of his boss riding the divine dragon. It was a pity that he could not share in the glory. Little did he know that after they parted, the two of them never met again. The scene of Yu Qianqiu riding the divine dragon and turning back to wave at him with a smile became the most unforgettable scene in Shi Xiaotian's long life. He searched for it in the future but could never think of it. He could only reminisce about it. Chapter 1175. The sky was high and the clouds were vast. Not a single trace of green could be seen in the demonic ghost region. It was no longer the demonic ghost region that was covered in dark clouds and overgrown with demonic ghosts. In the vast wilderness, Yu Qianqiu walked around with his hands behind his back. Under his feet was an underground space that spewed out green flames. Below him was a surging lava river. Yu Qianqiu sent Hong Tailong down, but he didn't dare to face the naked fat kid who was looking at him curiously. He quickly escaped outside, not wanting to hear or see the conversation between Hong Tailong and the kid. Yu Qianqiu walked to a cliff with his hands behind his back and looked around. He was unable to connect the desolate scene before him with the famous demonic ghost region of the past. He silently pondered for a long time. Suddenly the ground shook, followed by the sound of something breaking through the ground. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips, but he didn't turn around. Green flames gushed out from the hole on the ground as Hong Tailong slowly rose up with the bare buttocks child in tow. The child looked left and right, curiously looking at this desolate world. This was the first time he had seen the true appearance of this world. A small bird that flew across the sky had aroused his great interest, causing his gaze to chase after it with an unrelenting desire to part with it. Yu Qianqiu. Hong Tailong's voice was heavy as he walked behind Hong Tailong with the kid. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and saw the kid cowering behind Hong Tailong in fear, as if he already knew his fate. Yu Qianqiu wanted to squeeze out a harmless smile, but it looked worse than crying. He coughed and smiled bitterly at Hong Tailong. Forget it. Hong Tailong pulled the kid out from behind, squatted down and looked at the kid. What's wrong? Didn't we agree on this? The kid looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear and replied weakly, Grandpa, I'm scared. Hong Tailong buried his head, then raised it and smiled. Didn't Grandpa tell you? The immortal realm doesn't allow people from the lower realm to step into it. This is the only way I can bring you back to the immortal realm. Furthermore, you shouldn't exist in the mortal realm. Hong Tailong, forget it. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and bowed. Unexpectedly, the child bit his finger and said to Yu Qianqiu with a bit of shyness, Can I go see the world first? Then he lowered his head and said in an aggrieved tone, I still don't know what the human world is like. I'm afraid that when I reach the God realm. Hong Tailong frowned, but Yu Qianqiu hurriedly said, Sure. Hong Tailong, bring him around to take a look. I beg you. He could only beg Hong Tailong. He did not dare to accompany this child to look around. Hong Tailong carried the child and turned into a beam of light, disappearing into the distance. Yu Qianqiu touched his forehead in a dilemma. He walked to the place where the blue fire was spewing out and jumped down. He used the metal art and earth art to seal the fire hole. Then he flew back up and used the earth art to completely bury the space below. Then he sat down cross-legged on the ground. 3 days later, Hong Tailong carried the child back. The child had already put on his clothes and was holding a candied haw in each of his hands. However, his eyes had lost their usual liveliness. He was just a gluttonous child who felt that the candied haw was delicious and was munching on it numbly. Yu Qianqiu looked at the child and sensed something. Hong Tailong placed the child in front of him. The child looked at Yu Qianqiu blankly as if he did not recognize him. Hong Tailong took away the candied haw in the child's hands, sealed it in a crystal ball and swallowed it. When the child saw that there was nothing left to eat, he immediately hugged Hong Tailong's thigh and wailed. Glistening tears immediately appeared in Hong Tailong's eyes. He raised his head to the sky and howled. After which, his hand moved like lightning, slapping the child's head. The clothes on the child's body instantly turned into ashes, while the child's body condensed into a red ball of light in his palm. Hong Tailong sent the red ball of light to the mouth of Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting cross-legged. Yu Qianqiu's dry lips swallowed and slowly opened his mouth. Hong Tailong slapped the red ball of light into his mouth, then turned towards the sky and choked with tears. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a boiling sensation in his abdomen. He suppressed his agitated emotions and forced the red ball of light in his abdomen into his dantian. Suddenly, a golden light burst out from Yu Qianqiu's dantian and shone on the red ball of light. In an instant, the red ball of light turned back into the child. The child cheered and flew toward the red crystal bead. He swallowed the red crystal bead into his stomach. In an instant, red light burst out from his body. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a connection with the child. The child's expression instantly turned solemn. He sat cross-legged on the spot where the red crystal ball originally was and began to revolve around the nascent soul in his dantian along with the other 4 crystal balls. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that his cultivation had increased a little. However, the increase was not huge. When he thought about how he could accept the cultivation of the 5 spirits after devouring them, he reckoned that the child's cultivation had fused with his own. The child's innate understanding of fire surged into his mind like a tidal wave. He then began to quietly sort it out, At night, Hong Tailong gazed at the endless starry sky with his hands behind his back. Suddenly, a light flashed behind him. He slowly turned his head and saw a ball of blue fire on Yu Qianzhou's left shoulder, a ball of black fire on his right shoulder, and a ball of purple fire on top of his head. The situation was extremely strange. Not long after, the blue and black fire on his left and right shoulders slowly floated to the top of his head and pressed towards the purple fire in the middle. After the three flames collided with each other, they violently fluctuated as if they were repelling each other. Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting cross-legged, had a grave expression on his face. After about 2 hours, the three violently fluctuating flames finally calmed down and started to merge together bit by bit. When the three flames had completely merged together, Yu Qianzhou's eyes suddenly opened. 2 rainbow-colored rays of light shot out from his eyes. The overlapping 3 colored flames above his head rumbled like thunder and completely merged together in an instant. The gorgeous 3-colored flames turned into 7 colors. Instantly, the flames rose to a height of 100 meters. A rainbow-colored fire dragon burned incessantly above Yu Qianzhou's head. The terrifyingly high temperature immediately caused the ground to crack with crackling sounds. Countless cracks rapidly extended in all directions. Hong Tailong's pupils shrank. Even though he was a fire elemental fire dragon, he still found it hard to endure. Suddenly he felt a terrifyingly high temperature surrounding his body. Clearly Yu Qianzhou had noticed it. True Samadhi fire. Hong Tailong exclaimed. The remaining sadness on his face was instantly swept away. He clapped his hands and shouted, "You succeeded!" The rainbow-colored rays of light that burst out from Yu Qianzhou's eyes quickly retracted, forming 2 balls of rainbow-colored flames in his eyes. Yu Qianzhou slowly stood up and spread his arms to embrace the heavens and earth. His entire body instantly ignited with rainbow-colored flames, combining with the fire dragon above his head. They soared into the sky, reaching a height of 1,000 meters. The world flickered with rainbow-colored light, illuminating the desolate demon domain. It was as if the demon domain had obtained a new life. Yu Qianzhou slowly looked at Hong Tailong and said indifferently, "So, this is the true Samadhi fire. So it is rainbow-colored. I can feel its terrifying destructive might. It even gives me the urge to fight the demon lord 3 nights head-on." Hong Tailong turned a deaf ear to Xiao Chen's words. He raised his head and looked at the rainbow-colored flames that soared 1,000 meters in shock. He cried out involuntarily, "Why is there so much true Samadhi fire?" Lowering his head, he looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, "How many blue flames, black flames and purple flames are hidden in your body? You actually managed to fuse so many true Samadhi fire? This is only a portion. The true Samadhi fire in my body is enough to turn the area within 1,000 meters into a sea of true Samadhi fire. Furthermore, after fusing the 3 flames, it is equivalent to having 2 empty spots in my body. I can also collect the 3 flames at any time and fuse them at any time. My body can store more than twice the amount of true Samadhi fire. A mere 1,000-meter-long fire dragon is nothing," Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. Hong Tailong shook his head in disbelief. He had seen the true Samadhi fire by chance in the immortal realm. However, he had only collected 3 types of flames and fused them, then stored them in special treasures for future use. He had never heard of anyone being able to store the true Samadhi fire in their own body. Furthermore, it was such a large-scale storage and could be refined and stored at any time. This is simply unbelievable. If the artifact refinement experts of the immortal realm were to find out about this, they would definitely capture you and use you as a refinement fire cauldron. You must know that the best fire seed for refining divine equipment is this true Samadhi fire that can refine anything," Hong Tailong exclaimed. Yu Qianzhou gently clasped his palms together, and the soaring true Samadhi fire immediately retreated back into his body. The rainbow-colored flames leaping in his eyes also disappeared at the same time. Only then did Hong Tailong dare to approach him. He patted his shoulder and laughed. "With so much true Samadhi fire, you and I now have the capital to make a trip to the immortal realm and the netherworld. We'll slaughter those bastards until they wail like ghosts and howl like wolves. We'll let them know that I, Hong Tailong, have returned, ha." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. "By right I should be happy. However, I can't feel happy at all. This is all thanks to Qing." Speaking of that naked child, Hong Tailong's expression instantly dimmed. He smiled faintly and said, "I wonder when I can return to the immortal realm. Even if I do return to the immortal realm, I'm afraid it'll be several tens of thousands of years before I can see Qing again." Yu Qianzhou took a deep breath. He pulled himself together and said, "All right. Let's not talk about such a depressing matter. Let's go to the gate of the netherworld to retrieve the heaven and earth splitting arrow. Then we'll use the true Samadhi fire to completely seal the passageway to the netherworld. After that, we'll join hands and go to the immortal realm and the netherworld to deal with them. It'll be best if we can capture Kintai. I'll devour him as well. At that time, my cultivation will skyrocket. I want to see how the devil path will unify the three realms. The two of them disappeared from where they were at the same time. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in front of the gate of the netherworld. Looking at the gigantic divine arrow embedded in the gate of the netherworld, Yu Qianqiu made a grabbing motion with his 5 fingers and said sternly, "Come back." The divine arrow immediately shone with a golden light and shrunk rapidly. The gate of the netherworld closed quickly as well. A chilly wind that was as sharp as ink whistled out. After the gate of the netherworld was completely closed, there were still a few large holes in the middle of the gate. They were the large holes made by the sharp hexagonal blade of the divine arrow. The chilly wind that was as sharp as ink continued to pour out from the holes. Chapter 1176. Yu Qianqiu's long green robe fluttered in the fierce chilly wind, but he was indifferent to it. His eyes fell on the reliefs on the dark gate. The faces of the old man, the child, the man, and the woman were all different. Their expressions were vivid and lifelike as if they were telling him something. Wang. A rainbow-colored light blossomed in this underground world filled with cold wind. The true Samadhi fire enveloped Yu Qianqiu's entire body. The wind didn't scatter it as if it was solid. Yu Qianqiu's expression was solemn. He didn't know if he could completely seal the underworld passage by doing this, nor did he know if it was right, but he knew that this ghost gate was connected to the human world. It was too unfair to the living beings in the human world. If the ghost cultivator inside was unhappy, the living beings in the human world would suffer. No matter if it's right or wrong, since the affairs of the world are unpredictable, then let me be the one to administer punishment on behalf of the heaven. Whether it's right or wrong, I will bear the responsibility alone. A loud voice that sounded like he had become a Buddha suddenly resounded in the underground space. Perhaps it was because he had become a demon, but the skeleton sculptures on the walls of the netherworld Iron Mountain immediately reverberated with the same voice. The voice was like the sound of endless Sanskrit. Hong Tailong's heart suddenly surged with an indescribable solemn feeling. His gaze swept across the surroundings, but he didn't know how this voice was formed. Yu Qianqiu had already struck out with his palm. The true Samadhi fire on his body shot out from his arm, forcing back the cold wind that was blowing out. The rainbow-colored wall of fire covered the entire ghost gate of the netherworld. The expressions of the human skulls on the black door gradually changed. Then it slowly melted and disappeared, fusing with the entire door. It was as if all living beings had cut off their extravagant desires towards this world. All greed, anger, and delusion were separated into yin and yang. Dust to dust, dust to dust. The two worlds of yin and yang would never be connected again. The few cracks on the dark door were also gradually melted by the melted black molten iron. The gap between the door and the door frame was also completely closed. Yu Qianqiu withdrew the true Samadhi fire back into his body with a serious expression. The mournful, sinister winds completely died down, and the echoes of the Buddhist chants also disappeared. After the two of them looked around, Yu Qianqiu turned around and spread his hands at Hong Tailong. Didn't you say that after the Samadhi true fire sealed the underworld gate, the underworld passage would completely disappear? How come I don't feel anything? Could it be that it completely disappeared just like that? I've only heard of this legend. How would I know if it's true or not? Hong Tailong smiled bitterly. Before he could finish his sentence, he realized that there was something wrong with Yu Qianqiu's gaze as he looked behind him. He quickly turned around and saw that the blazing ghost flames were gradually dying down. The blazing flames from earlier were slowly being suppressed, and the intensity of the flames gradually weakened to the point where there was nothing left. The red molten lava kept on seething. Suddenly, as if a hole had opened up in the ground, all the fiery red molten lava instantly gushed into the depths of the ground. The entire underground space became pitch black, and even with their cultivations they could not see each other. It was as if they had entered some kind of black hole. Yu Qianqiu immediately became vigilant, afraid that there might be some danger. He immediately wanted to release his divine sense to bring Hong Tailong away, but he realized that he could not release his divine sense outside his body. What made him even more horrified was that his connection with Utopia had been completely severed. He could not leave even if he wanted to. Hong Tailong. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and shouted, but he realized that he could not make any sound. He wanted to move his limbs, but he realized that it was just wishful thinking. It was as if his soul had completely lost connection with his physical body, and only his thoughts and consciousness still existed. Damn. How did this happen? Could it be that I've really done something wrong? Is this a punishment for me? Yu Qianqiu shouted silently into the endless darkness. A deep sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart, but it was mostly filled with indignation and grief. He hysterically wanted to tear apart this endless darkness, but he was powerless to do so. Suddenly, spots of light flashed in front of his eyes, and he saw Hong Tailong, who was just inches away from him. The horrified Hong Tailong also saw him, and the two of them were stunned at the same time. They subconsciously raised their hands only to discover that they could move. However, their abilities had not returned. The two of them wanted to get closer, but they realized that no matter how fast they walked, they could not get close to each other. This short distance seemed to have become the end of the world. The two of them desperately ran toward each other. However, the two of them fell to the ground in exhaustion, unable to take another step forward. The endless feeling of strangeness almost caused the two of them to break down. They could see each other shouting loudly for them, but not only could they not hear it, neither could the other party. The two of them, who were sitting paralyzed on the ground, seemed to be floating in the endless void. They looked around helplessly, and the nether metal wall that was embossed with countless skulls suddenly became clear. Spots of light constantly floated out from the two empty eye sockets of the skulls. When the entire space was filled with countless spots of light, the skull wall quietly disappeared into the void. The drifting spots of light gradually moved rhythmically, but it also seemed to be without any pattern. Gradually, it formed a scene that looked like a vast starry sky. The two of them suddenly realized that they were sitting paralyzed in the endless starry sky, and they were even more shocked. The vast starry sky was weaving an ancient existence. Suddenly, all the stars trembled, and like a meteor shower, they flew toward a certain direction, some even passing through the bodies of the two of them. The two of them looked in that direction and they saw the door to the netherworld. All the meteor shower easily passed through the wall without any resistance, and the door to the netherworld was not damaged at all. The scene was exceptionally magnificent, and an indescribable feeling of great vicissitudes surged into the hearts of the two of them. When the last spot of light flew through the door, the entire door to the netherworld suddenly distorted, turning into a ball of black light. The black light was so deep that it seemed like it could devour everything. The more it spun, the bigger it became. Suddenly, it condensed into a point and disappeared. The two of them immediately felt the world tremble, as if they had woken up from a nightmare. The two of them stood together looking at each other. The bright and beautiful sunlight shone down from the sky, shining on the two of them. The two of them raised their heads to look at the sky in astonishment, and discovered that they had unknowingly stood in a vast and deep pit. The sun was at noon. Looking around, the door to the netherworld had disappeared, and the netherworld iron walls that were carved with countless skulls had also disappeared. The netherworld ghost flames, the surging magma, and even the netherworld hole formed by the netherworld iron had disappeared. It was as if the two of them had been transferred to a strange pit in an instant. A small insect that came out of nowhere fluttered its wings and flew between the two of them. The two of them stared at it without blinking. Perhaps the small insect was attracted by the bright colors, as it first flew towards Hong Tailong, who was dressed in red and danced between his eyes. Hong Tailong's eyes that were staring at it immediately turned into a cross-eyed look. The small insect circled around for a while before losing interest in Hong Tailong. It seemed to be more interested in Yu Qianqiu, and directly landed on Yu Qianqiu's face. Yu Qianqiu's eyes turned and he subconsciously gave a slap. It was a clear and resounding slap, causing his own face to feel pain. Hong Tailong stared at him in astonishment, while Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He raised his hand to take a look, and saw that the small insect had been slapped into pieces. The two of them looked at each other again and Hong Tailong weakly shouted, "Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu was startled and immediately shouted, "Hong Tailong?" The two of them heard each other's shout and looked at where they were standing. They were still in the same position as before the anomaly happened. They were not paralyzed on the ground at all. They moved their hands and feet and took a few steps forward. When the two of them got closer, they were touching and pinching each other like fools. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu gave Hong Tailong a fierce slap on the face. Hong Tailong covered his face and roared angrily, "What are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu picked his ears amidst the deafening roar and heaved a sigh of relief. "Damn it! He's really alive. That scared this old man to death." Where is this place? He flew out as if nothing had happened. Not only was Hong Tai Long not angry, he was also pleasantly surprised when he came back to his senses, and flew out with him. The two of them stood at the edge of the huge crater and looked around. Hong Tai Long was not too familiar with this place, but Yu Qianqiu could recognize it. They were still within the desolate demonic ghost region, and the original territory of Ill Wind Valley had been completely dug away. He had no idea where it had been dug to. Where is this? Hong Tai Long asked, not daring to be sure. We're still in the mortal realm where we're doing good deeds. You're right, the passageway to the netherworld has completely disappeared. Yu Qianqiu raised his head to look at the sun, and realized that the time had already changed from midnight to noon. However, the process that the two of them had experienced would definitely not exceed 4 hours, and it was a very strange experience. Sigh. It's good that you're fine. I was almost scared to death. I've never encountered such a strange thing before. Hong Tai Long laughed and patted his chest in relief. After relaxing, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "What should we do next? Go to the immortal realm in the netherworld?" Yu Qianqiu nodded his head heavily, looked around and let out a long sigh and said, "The matters in this mortal realm are more or less settled. It's time to solve the problems in other places. Let's go." With a wave of his hand, the two of them disappeared at the same time. In the Divine Ruin Realm base, Hong Tai Long strolled around with his hands clasped behind his back. When everyone found out that he was the divine dragon that the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch rode back then, they looked at him with incomparable shock, especially Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng. When the two of them felt the powerful dragon aura on his body, they actually faintly felt uneasy and restless. However, when Hong Tai Long saw the pheasant standing on Wu Lishua's shoulder, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise, "Phoenix!" So it's a dragon. Who are you? Why are you so noisy? I don't know you. The pheasant opened its eyes and choked him, then continued to stand on Wu Lishua's shoulder and closed its eyes to rest. Hong Tai Long was speechless. Originally, he felt that he was quite high and mighty, but he didn't expect that there would even be a phoenix of the same level as him here. His sense of superiority was immediately dampened, and he immediately became more well-behaved, no longer showing off that he was a divine dragon. After Yu Qianqiu gathered the various leaders to inquire about the recent progress, he dragged Hong Tai Long to the Great Snowy Mountain in the Netherworld. Chapter 1177. In the Great Snow Mountain of the Underworld, deep in the snowy plains, there was an ice cliff glowing with icy blue light that had existed for countless years. Silver armor soldier, purple armor soldier, blue armor soldier, and red armor soldier paced back and forth in front of the ice palace's gate, as if guarding the gate. The ice souls inside the ice sculptures shone with brilliant colors. They looked helpless and melancholy, thinking about something. Thousand armor soldier. Demon King 3 Knight has led the army of Demon Dao back to the Three Realms. What do you think? Red armor soldier suddenly turned around and asked Silver armor soldier. Purple armor soldier and blue armor soldier turned around at the same time. He's already come out, what can I think? Silver armor soldier stopped in front of a carp ice sculpture. His gaze focused on the eyes of the ice sculpture. There were two black ice souls there. Red armor soldier slapped an ice pillar in the pavilion next to him and sighed. We took such a great risk to seal Demon King 3 Knight and the others back then. What a great price we paid. But now the Underworld Emperor has released them and we've become the dogs of Demon Dao again. Back then we risked our lives to seal the Demon Realm for the peace of the Three Realms. But now, soldier, you're thinking too much. Silver armor soldier looked at him coldly and said in a low voice, "The Underworld Emperor has his reasons for doing this." The other three were silent. Within the ice palace, Shui Linglong, who was wrapped in a furry fur coat, fell asleep peacefully again. However, her face still had a sickly flush. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress both heaved a sigh of relief. They cupped their hands towards Bai Qi, who walked down from the ice bed and said, "Thank you, Emperor of the Underworld. We only talk about friendship, not thanks." Bai Qi smiled elegantly as he stepped on the ice barefoot. "This is why I didn't expose our relationship even in the most difficult times. If I really want to thank you, my 4 brothers should be the one thanking you for taking care of them. Underworld Emperor, you're too kind." The Snow Empress shook her head and smiled bitterly. The true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body is getting harder and harder to suppress. If the Emperor of the Underworld hadn't arrived in time and used his profound cultivation to suppress it, we wouldn't know what to do. The Snow Empress sat quietly beside her daughter. Bai Qi looked at Shui Linglong, who was sleeping peacefully, and nodded with a serious expression. Seems like it's getting more and more serious each time. Don't worry, if you need anything, just look for me. I'll be there anytime. I'll look for an opportunity to borrow the power of the devil's path to find the fire spirit of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Hopefully, I'll be able to remove the Samadhi true fire from Linglong's body in one fell swoop. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress looked at each other. They wanted to say something but hesitated. The Snow Emperor could not help but ask, I heard that the Emperor of the Underworld has released the Demon Lord of 3 Nights and the others? Bai Qi hesitated for a moment. He said, I understand your worries, but you can rest assured. Demon Monarch 3 Nights has already promised me that I will still represent the Underworld and the Demonic Path Army will not harass you. As for the outside world, you and your wife have never cared about worldly affairs. The changes outside have nothing to do with you. The Great Snow Mountain is still your Great Snow Mountain. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to make the decision when the time comes. The Snow Emperor sighed in his heart. However, there was nothing he could do. He smiled awkwardly and said, Thank you, Emperor of the Underworld. Bai Qi could guess what they were thinking. However, he was also in a difficult position. He still smiled warmly and said, All right. My 4 brothers have troubled you for a long time. I'm here to bring them away with me. We'll meet again in the future. The couple hurriedly sent him off. The 3 of them walked him all the way to the entrance of the Ice Palace. Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers and the other 3 also came over to express their gratitude to the couple. Both sides had their own matters on their minds. After exchanging some pleasantries, they were about to leave. Bai Qi and the others had just turned around when they all froze on the spot. Even the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress were no exception. 2 figures suddenly appeared on the ice cliff. Yu Qianshou and Hong Tailong were startled when they saw Bai Qi and the others. Hong Tailong suddenly laughed wildly and said, You can wear out iron shoes and fruitless searching, but you'll find what you're looking for without even looking for it. Bai Qi, I didn't expect to see us here. Hong Tailong. The 5 of them trembled and exclaimed in unison. Bai Qi was even more shocked as he said, You're not dead yet? Although the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress knew Yu Qianshou, they didn't know Hong Tailong. Seeing how shocked Bai Qi and the others were, in addition to Hong Tailong's tone, the couple instantly felt that something was amiss. Hong Tailong laughed loudly and said, What a joke! What can a mere spirit-severing smoke do to me? Bai Qi, you probably didn't expect to see me again even in your dreams. Where is Jean Tyron? Let's settle the score today. Bai Qi suddenly turned around and looked at the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress coldly. You 2 betrayed me? A murderous intent appeared on his face. The couple hurriedly waved their hands and explained, Emperor of the Underworld, you've misunderstood. Why would we betray you? Then how did they know I was here? Bai Qi shouted sternly. The Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers and the other 3 also looked at the couple with murderous intent. The Snow Emperor immediately smiled bitterly at Yu Qianshou and said, Yu Qianshou, why didn't you come earlier or later? Why did you come at this time? My husband and I can't even explain ourselves. Yu Qianshou was here to exchange for the Xianming soul refining technique. How could he let anything happen to the couple? He immediately laughed harshly and said, Bai Qi, it really has nothing to do with them. I know them and came to visit them when I was passing by. I didn't expect to see you here. You heartless bastard. You actually dared to collude with that bastard Yan Zhuixing to kill me? Today it's time to settle the score. Actually, there was no need to explain. Bai Qi was just angry for a moment. Thinking about the shocked reactions of Hong Tailong and Yu Qianshou, they obviously didn't expect to see him here. He immediately laughed coldly and said, With just the 2 of you? His gaze swept around as if he was worried that someone else would appear. The silver-armored soldier brandished his halberd, the purple-armored soldier brandished his scythe, the blue-armored soldier brandished his blue bow and arrow, and the red-armored soldier loosened his grip on the red-armored soldier's red chain. The 4 of them immediately stood in a straight line on either side of the battlefield. The Snow Empress and her husband smiled bitterly. It was obvious that the red old man wasn't someone to be trifled with. If the 2 groups fought, the Ice Palace would probably be destroyed. The Snow Empress gave a look to the Snow Empress, and the Snow Empress left hurriedly. It was more important to protect her unconscious daughter. With this, Yu Qianshou took out the golden heaven and earth splitting arrow and stabbed it into the icy ground in front of him. Everyone's eyes turned cold at the same time. A cold smile gradually appeared on the corner of Bai Qi's mouth, and he said, The heaven and earth splitting arrow is in your hands. It seems like the Myriad Swords Demon Lord is really dead. You scared me. It would have been fine if Bai Qi didn't mention the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. The moment Bai Qi mentioned the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, Hong Tailong immediately let out a wild roar and charged over. Bai Qi turned into a stream of light and shot into the sky, and Hong Tailong chased after him. The sky rumbled, and a white figure and a red figure entangled with each other. The two of them directly engaged in a fierce battle. The heaven and earth splitting arrow on the icy cliff instantly exploded into tens of thousands of divine arrows, and they shot toward the four netherworld generals like a torrential rain. Yu Qianqiu was now extremely courageous, and he dared to take the initiative to fight the four netherworld generals head-on. As expected, he didn't panic because he had the goods in his hands. Reckless fellow. The Silver Armor Army's cold laughter was still reverberating, but the four of them had already teleported and disappeared from their original spots. The attacks of the tens of thousands of divine swords immediately missed. It was unknown when the Silver Armor Army, the Red Armor Army, and the Purple Armor Army had appeared behind Yu Qianqiu, and they surrounded him. All of them had cold smiles on their faces, and the shadow of the halberd filled the sky. The shadow of the death god's scythe swept across Yu Qianqiu's waist, and the shadow of the red chain lashed out. With the cultivation of these three people, if Yu Qianqiu was hit by any one of them, he would immediately have to say goodbye to this world. Especially since the Blue Armor Army in the sky had already drawn their soul-slaying bows. If Yu Qianqiu was lucky enough to escape, the soul-slaying bows would immediately teach him a lesson. Boom! The tens of thousands of divine swords all shot into the enormous icy mountain. The icy mountain shook and countless cracks appeared on it. The Snow Empress directly dove into the ice on the ground to hide. At almost the same time that the four of them disappeared, Yu Qianqiu let out a furious roar, and his entire body exploded with a ferocious seven-colored flame. In an instant, it covered a radius of 1,000 meters. A ray of seven-colored light that illuminated the heaven and earth was like a resplendent pearl, blooming with gorgeous colors in the vast snowy mountain. Bai Qi, who was fighting fiercely with Hong Tailong, was already quite shocked. He actually discovered that Hong Tailong's cultivation was far stronger than before. Because he didn't know that the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch had used the Divine Dragon Empowerment technique to return half of Hong Tailong's cultivation to him before he died, he didn't have the time to notice that Hong Tailong had already made the first move. In addition, Hong Tailong's dragon body, which belonged to the dragon race, was extremely resistant to attacks. He actually withstood the black light shot out by the obsidian light mirror without caring about anything else. He only attacked without defending, completely throwing caution to the wind. It was as if he was fighting with his life on the line. Bai Qi really couldn't endure his opponent's ferocious attacks. Just when Bai Qi was preparing to endure a little longer and wait for the Silver Armor Army and the other three to kill Yu Qianqiu, they would come over to help relieve the pressure on Bai Qi. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the huge seven-colored flame blossoming below, and immediately cried out in surprise, "True Samadhi fire!" Taking advantage of Bai Qi's daze, Hong Tailong seized the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He opened his mouth and two rays of golden light shot out. Two dragon binding chains, one bound Bai Qi's legs and the other bound his upper body. In the blink of an eye, Bai Qi was tied up tightly. No matter how hard Bai Qi struggled, he couldn't escape. Bai Qi was instantly scared out of his wits. Hong Tailong angrily shouted, "Violent Dragon Fist!" Countless monstrous fist shadows gathered at one point and violently smashed onto Bai Qi's body. Bai Qi couldn't even let out a scream as he violently vomited blood. Boom! A huge deep pit was formed on the vast snowy ground. Hong Tailong rushed into the deep pit on the ground and didn't stop there. True Samadhi fire! The Silver Armor Army and the other three cried out in surprise before Bai Qi. They were caught off guard and were engulfed by the exploding seven-colored flame. The Blue Armor Heavenly Soldier had his bow drawn in the air, and since he was standing a little further away, he was able to dodge the attack with instantaneous movement. However, the Silver Armor Army and the other two who attacked Bai Qi were unlucky. They repeatedly teleported to avoid the flames that were chasing after them. After much difficulty, they finally escaped the flames that were chasing after them. However, they discovered that the weapons they attacked were stained with true Samadhi fire. This true fire could refine anything. Once it was stained, it would be a huge problem. They couldn't extinguish it no matter how hard they tried. They immediately threw away their weapons without hesitation, and the three treasures became useless on the spot. Chapter 1178. The iceberg where the ice palace was located melted instantly, not into water but into steam. Wherever the true samadhi fire reached and even further away, was filled with smoke and mist. The blue-armored celestial soldier who had just fled immediately noticed Bai Chi's terrible condition. He cried out in grief, "Emperor of Netherworld!" He turned around and shot the soul-slaying arrow at Hong Tailong, who was beating Bai Chi. Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be seen amidst the rapidly dispersing mist and the colorful flame. But suddenly Yu Qianqiu's furious roar rang out, "Kill!" Tens of thousands of golden specks of light shot out from the blazing flames, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. In order to save the Emperor of the Underworld, the blue-armored celestial soldiers who had drawn their bows and shot arrows furiously didn't care about their own lives. Instead of dodging the rain-like attacks of the divine swords, they braced themselves and turned around to shoot the arrow at Hong Tailong. As soon as the arrow was shot out, a dozen indestructible golden light specks pierced through his body, almost turning him into a sieve. The soul-slaying bow in his hand was cut into a few pieces by the rapidly piercing divine swords, making a buzzing noise as the bowstring was broken. Tens of blood spurted out from the blue-armored celestial soldier's body. Although he tried to choke back something with a reluctant expression, he still choked out a mouthful of blood. His head tilted to one side and he fell straight down to the snowland below. Silver-armored celestial soldier and his two companions, who had hastily dodged the divine swords, turned around and saw this scene. Immediately they let out a deafening howl, "Celestial army!" At this moment Hong Tailong dashed out from the deep crater with a bloody man in his hand. The soul-slaying arrow brushed past his shoulder. Boom! The ground shook and the snowland cracked. The colorful flame covering 1,000 meters on the snowland shrank rapidly, and a man made of fire dashed out. Behind him, tens of thousands of golden light specks circled like a shoal of fish in the ocean. Hong Tailong carried Bai Chi, who was already on the verge of death. His white clothes dyed in blood, and was still tightly bound by the dragon-binding rope. He flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side, handed him over and said, "Take him, I've already sealed his cultivation." Then he turned to look at the three dumbfounded people in the distance and sneered, "Leave those three fellows who helped the evildoer to me." Yu Qianqiu retracted his true samadhi fire and reached out to grab the dragon-binding rope. He looked coldly at Bai Chi, who was beaten up beyond recognition, and casually lifted him up. He wouldn't have the slightest bit of sympathy for him. This was a life-and-death battle. If he lost today, his ending wouldn't be any better. Other than death, they might even hand him over to Yan Zhuixing. That was why it was said that showing mercy to the enemy was equivalent to committing suicide. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu called out to Hong Tailong. His eyes narrowed as he swept a glance at the three people in the distance. He felt a little strange in his heart. If the three of them had split up and fled, Hong Tailong might not have been able to capture all of them. It would already be good if he could capture two of them. However, the three of them did not flee. Instead, they were looking at him with grief and indignation. Hong Tailong looked at him in confusion and asked, "Are we going to let them go?" Yu Qianqiu didn't reply to him. He stretched out his other hand and a divine sword flashed into his hand. He placed the sword on Bai Chi's neck expressionlessly and shouted at the three people, "If anyone dares to flee, I will immediately cut off his head. If you don't want him to die, then obediently surrender. I can consider letting you guys live." "No." Hong Tailong roared angrily, "I can let them go, but he must die." He pointed his finger at Bai Chi. From the looks of it, he still held a grudge against Yi Tiankong. "Why don't I hand him over to you and you can do whatever you want to do? After you're done, you can go back to your hometown and I'll go do my own thing. From now on, we won't have anything to do with each other?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him and sneered. Hong Tailong clenched his fists tightly and angrily turned his head away. "Yu Qianqiu, you have to keep your word." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers' sorrowful voice came from afar. "I, Yu Qianqiu, am famous for being a man of my word. What I say is already set in stone. Have you ever heard of me, Yu Qianqiu, going back on my word?" Yu Qianqiu grabbed Bai Chi and placed the sword on his neck. He shouted back, "As long as you guys answer my questions honestly and promise to serve me from now on, I can let you guys go." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers and the other two looked at each other with a bitter smile, then nodded in unison and slowly flew over. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and said, "Hong Tailong, go seal their cultivation bases." Seeing the three flying over, Bai Chi's eyes, which had already lost focus, once again lit up. His chest, which had almost been smashed, suddenly heaved up and down, and a large mouthful of blocked blood spurted out of his mouth. Staring at the three flying over with bloodshot eyes, He desperately roared in pain, "Run! Run! Don't worry about me. Don't believe his nonsense. Hurry up and go. I beg you guys." Yu Qianshou didn't stop Bai Qi from shouting. He pretended to be merciful to the three people. The three people looked at Bai Qi's pitiful appearance. Who could have imagined that the emperor of the underworld, who was so graceful in the underworld royal palace, would end up like this? The three men who were made of iron instantly burst into tears. They stubbornly shook their heads and refused. It was the first time in their lives that they refused the emperor of the underworld's command. They didn't expect it to be under such circumstances. The three people didn't leave. Instead they sped up and flew over. Bai Qi's face instantly swelled and tears of blood came out of his eyes. He screamed in pain, "Don't come over. Run." His voice was so miserable that it was like a ghost being thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Originally Hong Tailong hated Bai Qi to the bone. However, when he saw that Bai Qi was willing to give up his only hope of survival for the sake of his subordinates, he could not help but be moved. He cast a deep look at Bai Qi, who was crying tears of blood, and teleported to the front of Silver Armor Army and the other two without any hesitation. With a lightning-fast move, he quickly sealed their cultivations and brought them over. Seeing that the situation was under control, Yu Qianshou waved his hand and put away the 10,000 swords as one. He carried Bai Qi, who was badly mutilated, and landed on the ice field and threw him to the ground. Hong Tailong also threw the three people to the ground. The three people climbed up and wanted to help Bai Qi, who was still being helped. However, their cultivation was sealed, and they couldn't help Bai Qi, who was weighed down by the dragon binding rope. They fell down one by one, climbed up one by one, and fell down one by one. At this moment, the ice mountain that the ice palace was built on had melted. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress, who had hidden far away, also came back. The Snow Empress was still carrying her unconscious daughter. The two of them were also frightened by the fierce battle, but Yu Qianshou's true Samadhi fire attracted them. Once the battle ended, they immediately rushed back. They saw hope to save their daughter because Yu Qianshou had promised them. "Let him go. We have already stretched out our necks to be killed. You have already sealed his cultivation, why don't you let him go?" The Silver Armor Army roared at Hong Tailong, "Even if you want to kill him, there is no need to treat him like this. He was once the supreme emperor of the netherworld, and he has his own dignity. At least when the Myriad Swords Demon Lord died, no one humiliated him." The three people were really powerless to help Bai Qi up. Without their cultivation, the ice under their feet was slippery. There was no expression on Hong Tailong's face. For some unknown reason, he actually opened his mouth and swallowed the dragon binding rope that was binding Bai Qi back into his stomach. Without the weight of the dragon binding rope, Bai Qi choked out another mouthful of blood when the three people helped him up. He looked at the three people and shook his head with boundless grief and indignation. "Why are you all so stupid? We have no value to him now. Do you all really think that he will let us go? We know that there is no way out." The Purple Armor Army suddenly laughed bitterly and said, "But we are already used to going through life and death with you. We have been like this for so many years. Moreover, all of our lives were saved by you. You have never let us down and you have always treated us well. How can we bear to leave you behind?" Bai Qi closed his eyes and tears of blood flowed out from his eyes. Suddenly, he opened his eyes angrily and tilted his head to look at Yu Qianshou. He gritted his teeth and said, "Yu Qianshou, what will make you let them go?" Yu Qianshou looked at him coldly and didn't answer his question. Instead, he said indifferently, "Actually, before you attacked me that time, I didn't have any ill will towards you. I just don't understand. Could it be that just because Mu Yuanzi injured you, you're going to open the demon world and let all the beings of the three realms die with you?" Bai Qi's struggling body softened, and he lay in the arms of the Silver Armor Army of 1,000 soldiers. He laughed wildly and said, "Why? I also want to know why. I once led my subordinates to risk their lives for the sake of all living beings in the three realms. I risked my life to seal the demon realm with King Jingtai. For the sake of all living beings in the three realms, I've always suppressed Kim Tae and prevented him from acting recklessly. For so many years, I've always warned Kim Tae that if he dared to disturb the balance of the three realms, I would lead the heroes of the netherworld to beat him up. Otherwise, do you think that inhumane fellow would really treat everyone in the world as humans? Let me ask you, who has ever heard of the three realms not being in chaos for 100,000 years? But why?" Bai Qi retorted angrily, "Why do I have to bear the retribution for Master Jin's evil deed of killing the entire Wu family? Why did Mu Yuanzi injure me instead of dealing with the main culprit? Why do all the beings in the three realms turn against me when I'm working for the welfare of the three realms? Not a single person, not even a single person stood out to speak for me. Since the entire world is filled with heartless people, if I don't see rivers of heartless people's blood flow, why should I live in sorrow? Why should I die in sorrow? Then let me tell you why. Because there is no why. No matter how good you think you are, it's all because you think you are. Everything is retribution. If you can't figure it out, you can slowly think about it in your next life. Yu Qianqiu said as he took out a divine sword. Hong Tailong was slightly startled. Didn't you want to let him go? Why does it look like you want to kill me? Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu and the Silver Armor Army of 1,000 soldiers were negotiating terms because he didn't want to leave behind any future troubles that might suddenly pop up one day to take revenge. Thus, he purposely led the three of them to surrender so that they wouldn't slip through the net. To him, if he didn't kill a single one and let them all go, then he would be a good person. Since he was going to kill them, he would have to eliminate them completely. Moreover, Bai Qi was already a member of the Devil Dao. He had once sworn to the heavens at the 1,000-mile lake that he would exterminate the Devil Dao and sacrifice all living beings in the demon domain. Chapter 1179. Right at this moment, the Snow Empress suddenly flashed over. She braced herself and cupped her hands with a bitter smile. I know you want the Shenming soul refining technique. If you let go of the Emperor of the Underworld, I am willing to give it to you. The Snow Empress, who was carrying Shui Linglong, looked at them worriedly. She was afraid that her husband had angered Yu Qianqiu. After all, Hong Tailong and Yu Qianqiu were very powerful, especially Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi True Fire, which was the nemesis of the couple's cultivation method. More importantly, she was afraid that angering Yu Qianqiu would mean giving up the chance to cure her daughter. However, they were indebted to Bai Qi. Although she felt uncomfortable holding back some words, she couldn't say them out loud. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the couple, then slowly raised the divine sword in his hand and gently caressed the glowing edge of the sword. Snow Emperor, we had an agreement. I saved your daughter's life, and you gave me the Shenming soul refining technique in exchange. Now you want to use it to exchange for Bai Qi's life. You better think carefully. The Shenming soul refining technique can only exchange for one person's life. Whether it is Bai Qi or your daughter, it's up to you. The Snow Emperor lowered his head solemnly. The Snow Empress looked at her daughter in her arms, then at her husband, her face full of anxiety. Bai Qi struggled for a while and the three understood and helped him up. Facing the Snow Emperor, Bai Qi was very gratified and nodded. I appreciate Brother Snow's righteousness. With Brother Snow's words, I can die without regrets. My friendship with Brother Snow was not in vain. However, the four of us are destined to live and die together today. I will not live alone or it will be worse than death. So, please don't interfere in this matter. This has nothing to do with you and your wife. Emperor of the Underworld. The Snow Emperor wanted to say something, but Bai Qi had already turned to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was ignoring him, and sighed, I didn't expect this. Yu Qianqiu, who didn't even dare to speak loudly in front of me, was now in control of my life and death. It seems that the Saintess is indeed a prophet. I had already vaguely figured out some of it, but in the end I still made a mistake. I can't blame others for my fate. You're right, everything is retribution. Netherworld Saintess? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and lowered the sword in his hand. He tilted his head and asked, She told you about me? A bitter smile appeared on Bai Qi's bloody face, and his eyes became blurry. He recalled the conversation he had with the Underworld Saintess in the small courtyard of the Dark Royal Palace. He closed his eyes slightly and said, Yu Qianqiu, back then I wanted to kill you first. Killing me today is my retribution. However, I treated you well back then. Promise me one thing. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said faintly, Let's hear it first. Now that things had come to this, he wouldn't give in so easily. A warm expression appeared on Bai Qi's face as he said, Don't let the news of my death spread. That's all I want. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He asked with some surprise, You're already dead, yet you still care about the waves behind you. I want to know why. Is it worth it for me to promise you? Wan Ling's figure appeared in Bai Qi's mind. He had protected the entire 10,000 holy palace from the Demon King 3 nights. After rescuing Wan Ling, he and Wan Ling had an intimate time together. When they parted, he had said that he would come back to pick her up after finishing his business. Who would have thought that it would be an eternal farewell? He let out a soft sigh and closed his eyes as he replied, If she doesn't know that I'm dead, she will naturally live on. I have nothing left for her. The only thing I can give her now is to give her the hope to live on. Everyone else was confused, but Yu Qianqiu seemed to be deep in thought. He had already linked it to Wan Ling. He paused and said, I can promise you this. I originally wanted to use the Shenming soul refining technique to refine you all into profound weapons. As you said, on account of the kindness you have shown me, I will give the four of you a quick death. From now on, the grudges between us will be resolved, and we will not owe each other anything. As soon as he finished speaking, a golden light flashed in his hand. With 4 pu-pu sounds, 4 heads bounced up and fell to the ground. Warm blood spurted out from their mouths. The 4 corpses fell to the ground and twitched for a while before they stopped moving. The blood that flowed out from the severed heads quickly solidified on the icy ground. Hong Tai Long looked at Yu Qianqiu as he silently put away the divine sword in his hand. Previously he had thought that he would let them go. He didn't expect that he would not leave a single one alive. Hong Tai Long wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. The Snow Empress and her husband looked at Bai Chi's corpse dumbfoundedly. Suddenly, a ball of 7-colored flames swept across, and there was nothing left on the ground. Even the blood had turned into ashes. Yu Qianqiu turned around and walked towards the husband and wife. He stopped in front of the Snow Empress who was carrying Shui Linglong, and said indifferently, Snow Empress, I have always remembered the promise I made in the past. Today I have come to fulfill it. He stretched out his 5 claws and grabbed toward Shui Linglong. Not long after, a strand of 7-colored flame that was not much thicker than a strand of hair emerged from Shui Linglong's body. It was this little fellow that caused the Snow Empress and her husband to be helpless even with all their efforts. That strand of flame drilled into Yu Qianqiu's palm. Shui Linglong, who was still unconscious, let out a soft moan. Her body that was being carried moved slightly, and the sickly redness on her cheeks gradually disappeared. The husband and wife looked at their daughter who was recovering quickly, but they didn't feel the slightest bit happy. The Snow Empress raised her head and saw that Yu Qianqiu was staring at her with a burning gaze. She couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake her head. She took out a jade archive and quickly inserted something into it, then flicked it out. Yu Qianqiu casually caught the jade archive and examined it. After thinking for a long time, he nodded slightly and said, So that's how it is. I understand now. The jade archive was immediately crushed into pieces. In fact, the Shenming soul refining technique wasn't a technique that required a large amount of time to practice. It was a technique that condensed all of the opponent's cultivation into the essence of the technique and used it. It required a spiritual object that was connected to the user so that the user could control it. No matter what type of spiritual object was used, the user would need the same type as the medium to unleash its power. This was the reason why the Snow Empress said that Yu Qianqiu couldn't practice without absorbing the fire spirit. After understanding the secret of the Shenming soul refining technique, Yu Qianqiu was confident that he could use it on the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had to swallow all 5 spirits of heaven and earth. The Snow Empress would never have imagined that Yu Qianqiu had mastered all 5 elements of the technique. This was also the reason why Yu Qianqiu was so interested in the Shenming soul refining technique. As long as he mastered it, he would be able to summon an almost unkillable dark soldier in any terrain in the future. The Snow Empress and her husband didn't have anything to be happy about when their daughter's worries were resolved. They held their daughter and left with flagging interest. Now that the ice palace was destroyed, they suffered a great loss. The ice soul mysterious ice, which was refined by many experts, was destroyed by Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi true fire. But they didn't say anything and left. They wanted to find a suitable place to rebuild the ice palace in the snowy mountain. After today's scene, they saw Yu Qianqiu's ruthlessness. It was hard for them, who had always been aloof from worldly affairs, to accept it. They probably didn't want to have anything to do with Yu Qianqiu anymore. At least in their opinion, Bai Chi was much more affectionate and righteous. Yu Qianqiu stood silently on the ice field and watched the couple leave. He stood for a long time in the howling cold wind. After a long time he looked up at the dark night sky and sighed. I thought I would become friends with them, but I knew it was impossible when I decided to kill Bai Chi. All these years, in order to do some things, I gained a lot, but I also lost too many precious things. What is the most precious? The human heart is the most precious. The people I was familiar with left me one by one. Some died, some left, and there's no turning back. Maybe when I gain more, I will also lose more. Hong Tailong also couldn't accept the fact that he killed Bai Chi and the other 3 people. Although he was the one who shouted the loudest to kill Bai Chi, After hearing Yu Qianqiu's sigh, he seemed to understand his helplessness. After all, which person didn't have a story behind them? Everyone had been honest before, and maybe everyone had a touching story. But this was a life-and-death cultivation. There was more than one person like Bai Qi in the world, who could carry so many burdens on their shoulders. If they didn't get rid of them quickly, there would only be more and more burdens and nothing could be done. Just as Hong Tailong was about to say a few words of consolation, he discovered that Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and became spirited again. He immediately came back to life from his loneliness and disappeared in a flash. His recovery speed was too fast. It was as if he was a completely different person, as if nothing had happened earlier. After Yu Qianqiu searched around the icy plains, he found Bai Qi's treasure, the obsidian underworld light mirror. He tried to control it, but discovered that it was impervious to fire and water. Even his divine sense couldn't penetrate it. It seemed like there was no possibility for him to control it. Hong Tailong flashed to his side and sneered, "Don't try any more. The obsidian underworld light mirror is the symbol of the netherworld's supreme ruler. Other than meditation cultivators, no one from the outside world is able to control it." "There's such a strange thing?" Yu Qianqiu flipped it around and looked at it. Then he put it away with some regret. This thing could communicate with each other through a video call. It was a pity that he couldn't use such a high-grade treasure. Where should we go now? To sweep across the demonic path's army in the netherworld, or to slaughter in the immortal realm? Hong Tailong rubbed his palms together. He couldn't wait to prove to the three realms that he, Hong Tailong, had returned. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and calculated for a while. He muttered to himself, "Looking at the time, it's about time. I wonder if that fellow Xinyu will keep his promise." Then he suddenly raised his head and said, "My master doesn't know about the human realm being sealed. I want to report to him first." "Your master? Where?" Hong Tailong was stunned. Yu Qianqiu had already waved his hand, and the two of them disappeared from where they stood. By the Netherworld River beside the myriad heavens boundary barrier, the two of them appeared. Hong Tailong quickly looked around and asked hesitantly, "This is? You're finally here?" A woman's clear voice rang out. The two of them looked at the other side of the river. The Netherworld Saintess slowly walked out from the ground. It seemed like she had opened up an underground space for herself. Hong Tailong was a little surprised and wanted to ask, "Is this your master?" Yu Qianqiu was also a little surprised as he asked, "Why are you here?" The huge clamshell closed up, and it quickly swam upstream in the Netherworld River. When the few of them came out of the clamshell again, they had already arrived at the cliff within the boundary of all heavens. Hong Tailong stared at the huge moon with his mouth agape. Taishu Xian seemed a little excited to return to this place. He didn't greet the crowd and immediately flew in the direction of his home. Yu Qianqiu took out a flying shuttle and let Hong Tailong drive it. He brought along Jianghu and caught up with Taishu Xian in the blink of an eye. They carried her and quickly disappeared into the distance. When they arrived at the small courtyard on the monster-like mountain, Taishu Xian couldn't wait any longer and flashed down. White-haired Grandma Yen walked out of the house and saw her. She immediately called out with a trembling voice, "Little Xian." Taishu Xian quickly walked over and knelt down on the spot. She hugged Grandma Yan's leg and cried, "Grandma, Xianer is back." After Grandma Yen helped her up and checked on her, the two of them hugged each other and cried. As they cried, they asked each other something and completely ignored the three people who walked in after them. After a long while, the two women who looked like a grandparent and granddaughter finally stopped crying. When Grandma Yen saw Yu Qianqiu, she wiped her tears and let go of Taishu Xian. She walked to him and bowed, "Yu Qianqiu, this old woman thanks you." She was thanking him for bringing back Taishu Xian who had disappeared for so many years. "You can't do that." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly held her. Grandma Yen didn't stand on ceremony. She pulled his hand and led him into the house. She then waved at the other two people and said, "Come in, come in, come in, everyone come in." "Grandma Yen, you don't have to be so polite." Yu Qianqiu persuaded her and said seriously, "I still have something to do, so I won't disturb you this time. I'll visit Grandma next time." He suddenly thought of something and asked respectfully, "By the way, Grandma, have you heard any news about my master recently?" Hong Tailong's ears pricked up. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a stunned expression and pondered in his heart. Could this guy's master be in the mausoleum of the god of sin? "Your master?" Grandma Yen was also stunned. Then she came to a sudden realization and said, You're asking about that green-robed madman, right? Ah. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. The so-called green-robed madman shouldn't be anyone else. He then coughed dryly and said, "From what Grandma said, you seem to have news about my master?" Grandma Yen also felt that her choice of words was a little inappropriate, but she still frowned and nodded with a solemn expression. She said, "I do know, but you must not let the others here know that he is your master. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will bring you trouble." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched again. He guessed that the old man had done something that angered the heavens and the people again. So he asked weakly, "Grandma, can you explain it clearly? What exactly happened?" Sigh. Grandma Yen sighed and shook her head. She said, "Your master killed old man Meng? That's not all. He provoked the other tomb guards one after another. As a result, many of them were angered by him. So, more than 100 of them joined forces and finally beat him up until he was seriously injured. Who knew that after he escaped into the boundary of heavens to recuperate, he would not stop. After he came out, he killed 60 to 70 minor god-level cultivators in a row. Dozens of them were seriously injured and luckily escaped with their lives. In the end, a tomb guard with the cultivation of an early-stage great god was alarmed. He and your master fought fiercely for a day and a night. In the end, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them were seriously injured and had to retreat. Your master has not come out to cause trouble for a long time. He has been recuperating in the boundary of heavens. Although everyone can see him, they can't break into the boundary of heavens. So they can't do anything to him." Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. He realized that the old man was getting more and more reckless. He dared to challenge a group of god-level experts alone. Was it fun to be seriously injured for no reason? It was simply unreasonable. The others were also speechless. After the shock, Taishu Xian's eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Xinyu seemed to have heard of this before. He was speechless. Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at a monster. Never in his dreams would he have thought that Yu Qianqiu had such an awesome master. Grandma Yen paused for a while and smiled bitterly. "Now, the people in the cemetery of the God of Tombs are in a state of panic because of your master. No one knows when he will come out to cause trouble again. Everyone is spreading the news, hoping to unite to deal with your master." Sigh. "Back then, if it wasn't for last Xian who divined for me and told me not to get involved in the matters outside, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to escape from your master's hands. I just don't understand. What is your master trying to do? Everyone here is a group of people who stand aloof from worldly affairs. Why would he want to disturb the peace here? No one is provoking him. That, he. Yu Qianqiu blushed with shame. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "There's something wrong with the old man's head. Don't lower yourself to his level." Grandma Yen immediately said angrily, "Who wants to lower themselves to his level? We really don't want to lower ourselves to his level, and we can't wait to stay away from him. But he insisted on coming to our door, and we can't leave the cemetery of the God of Tombs. What do you want us to do?" Yu Qianqiu also smiled bitterly. The old man was still resolutely striving for a higher and stronger goal. It seemed that he had never wavered in that thought. Yu Qianqiu didn't know what to say. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, Taishu Xian immediately came forward to resolve it. "Grandma, I want to pay my respects to Father and Grandfather Moon God." Grandma Yen glanced at her and understood what she was thinking. She didn't linger on this topic anymore. She shook her head and walked out with the help of Taishu Xian. "Ahem. Since they are elders, I should pay my respects." Yu Qianqiu followed out with some guilt. Then he cursed in his heart. "Damn it. I didn't do the wicked things that the old man did. Why should I feel guilty?" Hong Tailong and Xin Yu looked at each other and followed out. In front of the tombs of Taishu Zheng and the moon god, Taishu Xian knelt down and kowtowed sincerely. He was even muttering something. Yu Qianqiu bowed repeatedly to the tombstones. Xin Yu followed suit. Hong Tailong crossed his arms and followed suit. Taishu Zheng didn't know who it was. When he saw the tomb of the moon god, he muttered, "So the moon god is buried here too." Grandma Yen saw that he was being disrespectful and naturally couldn't stand it. But when she realized that she couldn't see through his cultivation, she couldn't help but mock. "Do you know my husband?" Hong Tailong turned around and was stunned. After he reacted, he said disapprovingly, "The moon god. I heard of him when I was in the divine realm." "You are?" Grandma Yen was stunned. She glanced at them and asked in confusion, "You are also from the divine realm? Why haven't I seen you before? May I know your name?" She mistakenly thought that Hong Tailong was a tomb guard in the Divine Tomb Cemetery. It's not strange that you haven't seen me before. Hong Tailong revealed a normal expression and said, I, Hong Tailong, am a nobody in the Dragon Clan. I have never made a name for myself in the Divine Realm. It's normal that we haven't seen each other. You are from the Dragon Clan? Grandma Yen looked at him in surprise as if she couldn't believe it. Just as she was about to ask again, she saw Hong Tailong casually walking to the front of the huge grave mound. He caressed the dark red crystals that formed the grave mound and said, It is said that as long as the corpse of the person buried in the blood jade red crystals is intact, his cultivation and corpse can be maintained. At the same time, the blood jade red crystals can absorb the essence of the moon and condense the dead soul. When the time is right, the dead can be resurrected. This is also the reason why people in the Divine Realm fight to be buried in the Divine Tomb Cemetery. I wonder if it's true? Grandma Yen was already annoyed by his rude behavior. Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and quickly pulled Hong Tailong away to stop him from carelessly touching the grave mound. Then he pulled Xinyu along and the three of them bid farewell to Grandma Yen. Grandma Yen nodded unhappily. She didn't say any polite words and let the three of them leave. Chapter 1181. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Hong Tailong, who was on the rapidly flying shuttle, was also somewhat unhappy. He could also tell that Grandma Yen wasn't very fond of him. He coldly snorted at Yu Qianqiu. Why are you afraid of her? She's no match for me with her cultivation. You think you're right? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Respect the dead. If you don't put her in your eyes, she didn't offend you. Why did you have to touch her grave? No one would be happy. Do I, a dragon, have to kneel and kowtow to her family's dead? Hong Tailong waved his hand disdainfully and continued to steer his flying shuttle. Suddenly he turned around and sneered, I understand. You're afraid that you'll be implicated by your master's troubles. You're afraid that she'll be unhappy and expose your identity, right? Don't talk about useless things. Yu Qianqiu snorted. He crossed his arms and rubbed his chin, thinking about something. The expression on his face was somewhat strange. Suddenly he looked at Hong Tailong with a strange gaze and said, Let me ask you, you said that as long as the corpses of the dead are intact, they can maintain their cultivation. Is that true? I don't know if it's true, but that's what I've heard in the Divine Realm. However, I've never heard of anyone being resurrected, so I'm not sure. Why are you interested in this? Do you also want to be buried in? Hong Tailong's voice paused and his body suddenly trembled. He turned around and exclaimed in shock, Could it be that you want to use the Shenming soul refining technique too? He glanced at Xinyu and swallowed his words. He still didn't know how close this Xinyu fellow was to Yu Qianqiu, and there were some things that he couldn't let him know. However, Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully and said, If his cultivation really hasn't dissipated, I wonder if it's been too long since he died. Is there any use in using the Shenming soul refining technique? Hong Tailong's eyes flickered as he swept his gaze across his surroundings. He was a little excited as he chuckled. Do you want to give it a try? He seemed to be searching for a target. Xinyu looked at the two of them in confusion. He didn't know what they were talking about, but his instincts told him that they were up to no good. At that moment, the flying shuttle arrived above the tomb that Old Man Meng had been guarding. The ground was full of potholes as if an interstellar war had taken place. However, the dark red crystal tomb was still there. Hong Tailong winked at Yu Qianqiu and gestured at the grave below. Yu Qianqiu immediately had a look of disdain on his face. Looking at this old fellow's character, he must have done a lot of good things with Yi Tiankong back then. I'm not in the mood for this right now. Let's go to the edge of the all-celestial boundary and see how my master is doing, said Yu Qianqiu as he pointed forward. All right. We'll talk about it when we get back. Hong Tailong chuckled as if he was very interested in being a thief. He forgot about the dignity of the dragon race and flew away on the flying shuttle. The flying shuttle soon arrived at the edge of the all-celestial boundary. Who knew that just as it approached, someone would shout, Who is it? Suddenly, 3 people descended from the sky, forming a triangle around the flying shuttle. Hong Tailong's gaze swept over the 3 people, and his pupils shrank slightly. He discovered that he could not see through the cultivation of these 3 people. They were clearly higher than him. Yu Qianqiu knew that they had encountered an expert when he saw Hong Tailong's expression. He quickly cupped his fists at the 3 and said with a smile, We heard that someone is doing evil here, so we came here to see which madman has the guts to do so. The 3 of them turned a deaf ear to his words. Their gazes were fixed on Hong Tai-long as they looked at each other in disbelief. After a long while, one of them asked in bewilderment, "You're from the dragon race?" The three of them had a higher cultivation than Hong Tai-long, so they could see through Hong Tai-long's true form. "Can't I?" Hong Tai-long shouted with an imposing manner. "I heard that someone is doing evil here. I came here to investigate. Could it be that you are trying to stop me?" "So it's the dragon race's emissary." The three of them mistook Hong Tai-long as an emissary sent by the dragon race. They bowed and greeted him. The person who answered earlier even explained to Hong Tai-long respectfully, "There is indeed a madman doing evil here. He is inside the all-celestial boundary ahead. Emissary, please report back to Great Coiling Dragon God as soon as possible and eliminate this person." "Let me there." Hong Tai-long pointed at Hong Tai-long and put on airs. The three of them immediately led the way. Yu Qianqiu looked at Hong Tai-long with a disgusted expression. He was even more certain that this old fellow must have done many bad things in the past. After arriving at their destination, the group stood at the edge of the transverse cliff. The person who answered earlier waved his hand and pointed into the darkness ahead. "Emissary, please look. That person is right there." Yu Qianqiu and the others looked in the direction he pointed. In the void not too far away, Bai Changchun was quietly floating there in his green robe. His eyes were closed and his brows were drooping. He was motionless like a statue. Golden arcs of light constantly flickered around his body. They either flew out of his body in complicated trajectories or entered his body in an ethereal manner. The golden arcs of light were constantly moving in and out of his body. No one knew what they were doing. Hong Tai-long glanced at Yu Qianqiu. From his expression, he confirmed that it was his master. He suddenly shouted, "Hey! Who is doing evil here? Quickly report your name." "It's useless." The person who guided them shook his head and explained, "The all-celestial boundary isolates everything. He can't hear our voices at all. We also don't know when he will wake up and we can't go over either. So, this person is very strange. I don't know what method he used to hide in the all-celestial boundary. I'm afraid Emissary Dragon will have to report back to Great Coiling Dragon God before he can make a decision. We can't contact your master. What should we do?" Hong Tai-long secretly transmitted his voice. Yu Qianqiu was also helpless. He said in the dark, "Forget it. Let's focus on our own matters first." Hong Tai-long then said to the other three with a stern expression, "I know what to do. I will go back and report back now." The three quickly offered to send him off, but Hong Tai-long rejected them. He drove the flying shuttle again and left with Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu. After watching them leave, one of them expressed doubt. "Why do I feel that this emissary dragon is a little strange? He actually brought two people with such shallow cultivation with him, and he even drove the flying shuttle himself. Do you think he might be an imposter?" Another person shook his head and said, "Why do you care so much? There's no doubt that he's a dragon. It's even more impossible for him to be an imposter. If he wasn't here on imperial orders, he wouldn't have been able to break through the all-celestial boundary. Besides, have you ever heard of a dragon daring to impersonate Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy?" As they were discussing, Hong Tai-long, who had flown far away, suddenly turned around on the flying shuttle. He put his hands on Yu Qianqiu's shoulders and said with a trembling voice, "If the matter of me impersonating Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy gets out, you have to help me explain to Great Coiling Dragon God. I'm only impersonating him so that you can meet your master." "All right, I know." Yu Qianqiu pushed his hands away and said nonchalantly, "What's there to be afraid of? You didn't lie. You're Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy. Don't think too much. Stop there and we'll do our own things." Xinyu had been listening to the conversation between the two in bewilderment. Why did it involve Great Coiling Dragon God again? He felt that things were getting out of hand. He didn't know if following these two fellows was a blessing or a curse. Hong Tai-long sighed and turned around. He thought to himself, "I'm afraid my time as an envoy has long expired." Not long after, the three of them returned to the sky above the lonely tomb. Hong Tai-long looked around and made sure that there was no one around. He quickly put away the flying shuttle and the three of them landed in front of the tombstone. There were words on the tombstone. "Hong Hua Star Monarch. I've heard of this person. He's a member of the Light Ancient God clan. I think he's a late-stage great god. However, he fell when the demon god wreaked havoc in the divine realm. I didn't expect him to be buried here." Hong Tai-long nodded as he looked at the tombstone. "Ah, his surname is Hong just like yours." Yu Qianqiu teased. Hong Tailong was about to retort when he saw Yu Qianqiu lightly stomp his feet. The three of them immediately sank into the ground. Then the ground above them closed up again, blocking the bright moonlight. Hong Tailong couldn't help but shake his head. This guy really knew the earth elemental art. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu used the earth elemental art to sense the depth of the tomb. After diving down to a depth of 10 meters, he suddenly pointed with his finger. The soil in front of him parted, and a large hole appeared on the wall made of blood jade and red crystals. Immediately, a faint red light could be seen moving gently in front of him. Yu Qianqiu looked at it warily. He stepped aside to make way and said, "There's no danger in there, right?" Hong Tailong was speechless. He knew that this guy meant for him to go in and check first. He strode in and walked around. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he shouted, "Come in. It's fine." Yu Qianqiu then swaggered in while Xinyu followed behind him in fear. He realized that every time he followed Yu Qianqiu had to do some unimaginable and scary things. The space inside the tomb was not small, and the lighting was good. The entire tomb's walls and floor were made of blood jade red crystals. Strands of red light shone down from the blood jade red crystals on the ceiling. They formed a fan shape and focused on a corpse in the center. It was a man's corpse, and he was also lying on a long bed made of blood jade red crystals. Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu were still looking around, but Hong Tailong was already at the side of the long bed, trying to touch the corpse on it. Xinyu didn't dare to move. Yu Qianqiu walked over to take a look. The man's corpse had a goat-like beard and a serene expression. It was as if he was sleeping and he didn't look like a dead person at all. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but curiously poke his head over and asked, "What are you doing?" Hong Tailong pinched open the man's mouth and peeked inside. He then opened the eyelids to take a look. Then he clapped his hands and said with a curious expression, "The corpse is actually soft. There's a piercing wound in his heart, but I can see that the original wound was even bigger. It's obviously healing at an extremely slow speed. It seems that the legend about the mausoleum of the god of sin is true. There might really be a possibility of resurrection. If you don't believe me, come and touch it." He pointed at the corpse on the long bed to Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 1182. Motherf asterisk Ker. I'm not as perverted as you. I've never had the hobby of touching corpses. Moreover, it's a corpse that has been dead for God knows how many years. How could you do it? Yu Qianqiu spat in disgust. He had seen enough of the corpse's disgusting actions. However, he still couldn't help but poke it a few times to see if it was real or fake. Finding that it really was soft, he couldn't help but pinch the corpse's arm. He coughed and pulled his hand back. I'm more concerned about how his cultivation base is preserved. The two stood in front of the corpse that had been dead for God knows how many years and chatted. They even touched each other. Jianghu subconsciously looked around and felt extremely horrified. Can you not always say one thing but mean another? Hong Tailong spat back. He then went straight to the point. Without giving Jianghu a chance to refute, he said, "His cultivation seems to have been damaged. I heard that Honghua Star Lord was a late-stage great god back then. Now he's only a mid-stage great god. Try and see if you can use it." What were these two guys trying to do? Jianghu stared at the two people who had their backs to him surrounding the corpse. Middle-stage great god. It's enough, it's enough. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the entire corpse with a beaming smile on his face. Then he patted Hong Tailong's chest with the back of his hand, hinting him to step aside. Then he circled around the long couch twice. No one knew what he was thinking, but he shook his head again and again. Suddenly, he waved his hand and a seven-colored flame enveloped the entire corpse. Then he closed his eyes and remained motionless. It was Xinyu's first time seeing the seven-colored flame and he was shocked. The flame that covered the corpse slowly melted under his claws until it became a ball floating in the air. There was a layer of grayish-white human-shaped ashes on the long bed of blood jade and red crystals, which was obviously left behind after the corpse was cremated. Yu Qianqiu suddenly opened his eyes. There were two leaping flames in his eyes. He flipped his 5 claws that were spewing out 7-colored flames. The already shrunken fireball was held in his palm, and it kept shrinking. When all the 7-colored flames had entered his palm, a sparkling and translucent purple bead was quietly lying on his palm. There was a faint red light inside the purple bead. So, the bead for a god-level cultivation base is purple. Yu Qianqiu looked at the bead in his palm and said excitedly, "Success." Hong Tailong flashed over to take a look. Xinyu still did not understand what they were doing. "You'll know once you try." Yu Qianqiu threw the bead in his hand and a 7-colored flame sprayed out from his palm. The purple bead spun in the 7-colored flame and quickly absorbed the flame. Gradually, a 3-meter-tall 7-colored flame man appeared. It looked like it was materializing. If he succeeded, wouldn't he have to refine 10 million divine-level dark weapons? Not to mention the 3 realms, with so many divine-grade profound weapons, even in the God realm, they would be able to sweep through a region. Hong Tailong rubbed his hands excitedly and said, "Didn't your master kill quite a few tomb guardians? You probably don't know that we'll find a few good tombs in other places and empty them. Back then, our coiling dragon ancestor killed the wind god of the 12 ancient gods. The body of the wind god is also buried here. That's a terrifying expert with the cultivation of a late-stage ancient god. Don't you want to refine him into a mystic weapon?" That wretched smile on his face was filled with the feeling of enticing people to commit a crime. It was obvious that he was very interested in stealing. No wonder he was in cahoots with the myriad swords demon monarch Yi Tiankong. One of the 12 ancient gods, late-stage ancient god. Yu Qianqiu and Xin Yu both cried out in surprise. The former's eyes were even brighter. He had heard of the wind god's great name before. That was one of the top 12 experts since the creation of the world. If he could refine him into a mystic weapon, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the divine realm. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His expression suddenly froze and he asked suspiciously, "Hong Tailong, the tomb of a figure like the wind god must be guarded by an expert. I wonder what their cultivation is like." The smile on Hong Tailong's face froze and he said awkwardly, "I heard that the people guarding the tomb of the wind god are his left and right envoys. They are called Tianfeng and Difeng. Their cultivation had reached early stage ancient god a long time ago. I wonder what level their cultivation is now, hee. What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianqiu snorted and asked, "Digging the tomb of the wind god is no problem. But who can handle the 2 ancient god experts? You or me? Damn it. Even if you want to die, this is not the way to do it." Even Jianghu couldn't help but roll his eyes at Hong Tailong, hee. "Even if we can't dig the tomb of the wind god, we can still dig the tomb of others." Hong Tailong didn't give up and said, "Now that you have a mid-stage great god fire soul mystic weapon, you should be able to handle ordinary mid-stage great god tomb guards. Even if you can't, you should be able to stall them. It's enough for you to dig the tomb. Think about it, for a tomb guard of a mid-stage great god expert, the tomb master's cultivation is probably almost at the ancient god level. You can get a few more ancient god level mystic weapons and use them to deal with Tianfeng and Difeng. Won't you be able to dig the tomb of the wind god in the end?" As he spoke, he even made a move to take drastic measures. Towards this immoral idea, Xin Yu lowered his head and looked at the ground without any expression. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, nodded in agreement. "That makes sense. But I'm afraid it's not possible now." Hong Tailong said unwillingly, "Why?" "It's very simple. First, the tomb guards here have already been alerted by my master. I'm afraid that they have already linked up. If we're not careful, we might run into their hands. So, my master messing around is equivalent to ruining our plans. Second, although this fire soul mystic weapon is powerful, it needs enough fire to boost its power. The true samadhi fire stored in my body can only be used to scare people. It might be fine against ordinary experts, but it definitely can't support him to fight with a real expert. Otherwise, once he is defeated, he won't be able to revive in time. At that time we'll be in trouble. Jianghu and I saw this with our own eyes at the Great Snowy Mountain. Third, with the terrain here, if we really want to do something, only the Earth Soul mystic weapon can unleash its full power. If I can devour the Earth Spirit, it'll be much safer." "Earth Spirit?" Hong Tailong scratched his head and said gloomily, "Where are we going to find the Earth Spirit at this time?" Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly and said, "Unfortunately, I've heard Demon King 3 Knights say that he has an Earth Spirit under him. If we want to find an Earth Spirit, I'm afraid we'll have to find trouble with Demon King 3 Knights. Also, I've long wanted to make a move on Jean Tai's gold spirit, but I haven't had the chance. Now is the time to do it together." "Good." Hong Tailong clapped his hands and praised, "I'm also going to find Jean Tai to settle the score. Let's go and find him now." Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to look at Jianghu with a smile. "Jianghu, this celestial barrier is very deceitful. I'm embarrassed to trouble you to come and fetch us all the time. Why don't you come with us? That way it'll be convenient for everyone. What do you think?" Jianghu was speechless. He wanted to refuse, but was there any use in refusing? If you don't say anything, I'll take it as you agree. Yu Qianqiu directly made the decision for him. With a wave of his hand, the three of them instantly disappeared from the tomb. After the three of them returned to the underground base of the Divine Ruin Realm, Yu Qianqiu arranged for Jianghu to stay in a karst cave deep in the base. Wei Chuanqiu, Yun Peng, and Bai Suzhen were all cultivating there. There was also underground water for Jianghu, the muscle spirit, to take a bath. At the same time, Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng received a hint from Yu Qianqiu that Jianghu was very important to him and that nothing should happen to him. In fact, he was under house arrest. Chapter 1183. Inside the underground karst cave, Xinyu, who was under house arrest, was not afraid at all. Instead, he heaved a sigh of relief. For him, being able to find a secluded place to cultivate in peace was better than anything else. He really didn't want to follow Yu Qianqiu and take risks. In his memory, as long as he followed Yu Qianqiu, there was never a time when he wasn't on tenterhooks. Everything he did was unimaginable and frightening. The underground karst cave was full of twists and turns, and the space was quite large. Yu Qianqiu had said that as long as he didn't leave this place, no one would restrict his freedom. Thus, he turned into the depths of a winding passageway and settled down. He had also thought it through. Since he had nowhere to reason with, he might as well obediently serve Yu Qianqiu. It was nothing more than going in and out of the boundary of heavens a few more times. As long as he did his part, based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu after being in contact with him for so long, Yu Qianqiu would not do anything to him. Hong Tailong walked around the huge underground karst cave with his hands clasped behind his back. He had no interest in Yu Qianqiu's trivial matters. Yu Qianqiu was negotiating with Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng when his gaze suddenly stopped on the stone wall of the karst cave opposite the underground river. A beautiful woman in fluttering white clothes was looking at him gently with a faint smile. Cough cough. That's it. Yu Qianqiu said and directly flashed to the opposite entrance of the cave. Bai Suzhen gently held his hand. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they turned around and entered the cave together. Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng looked at each other. The former blew his beard and glared at him. What a guy who only cares about the opposite sex. Inside the cave where Bai Suzhen cultivated, there was a clean long couch. Yu Qianqiu was lying comfortably on it with his head resting on the thigh of a beauty. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Bai Suzhen, who was stroking his face and smiling at him. He asked, "Why did you stop cultivating? Did we disturb you?" Bai Suzhen shook her head and said with a smile, "I couldn't hear your voices even after setting up a soundproof enchantment. I just wanted to take a walk after I finished cultivating and saw you." So that was how it was. By the way, there's something I want to tell you. Yu Qianqiu lay on her lap and told her about what had happened recently, especially about how all the cultivators in the human world had been wiped out. Then he stared at the expression on Bai Suzhen's face without blinking. Bai Suzhen frowned, then nodded slightly and said, "I understand what you mean. When you think it's appropriate, let's go back to my home and move my Snow Fox clan to a safe place." Yu Qianqiu didn't know what to say to this considerate confidant. He raised his hand and grabbed the hand that was caressing his face. A naughty smile suddenly appeared on his face as he said, "I think it's time for our relationship to take another step forward." Take another step forward? Bai Suzhen was startled. For a moment she didn't know what he meant. Yu Qianqiu's finger had already gently touched the bulge of her heart. Then he pressed his entire palm on it. Bai Suzhen immediately understood what he meant. A blush appeared on her face and a hint of shyness flashed through her eyes. Bending her soft waist, she lowered her head and took the initiative to press her lips against Yu Qianqiu's. The warmth of the other party's body and the attractive aura on their lips immediately ignited the lust in their hearts. Seeing that she agreed, Yu Qianqiu's beastly nature instantly erupted. He suddenly flipped over and placed Bai Suzhen on the bed. Bai Suzhen let out a moan. Their mouths couldn't be separated. Their tongues tangled together, and his hands were groping all over Bai Suzhen's body. Just as he pulled open Bai Suzhen's clothes, revealing her snow-white skin, his hand touched her soft and smooth skin. Before he could reach in, he suddenly heard Hong Tailong's loud voice coming from outside. "Yu Qianqiu, where did you go?" This voice was so loud that even the people outside the base could hear it. *CK. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and looked at the beautiful woman who was panting under him. He threw caution to the wind and said, "*CK. Let's not care about him. Let's get down to business first." Just as he laid down again, Bai Suzhen suddenly couldn't help but burst out laughing. She reached out her hand to support his body and said, "You go do what you need to do first. I can't relax with someone outside. Next time, come and find me. We'll find a quiet place." What she meant was that this time there was no atmosphere. The swan meat that he could finally taste after waiting for such a long time was scared away by someone. Yu Qianqiu instantly jumped up with a face full of grief and indignation. He quickly walked out and his angry roar came from outside. "Hong Tai Long. You uncultured thing. I was doing something very important but I was interrupted by a beast like you." Bai Suzhen sat up on the bed and tidied up her messy clothes. When she heard Yu Qianqiu yelling at someone outside, she couldn't help but giggle. She tidied up her hair and walked out. Hong Tai Long, who had been scolded to the point that his head was spinning, finally waited for Yu Qianqiu to take a breather. He said with a stunned expression, "What did I interrupt you for?" Just as he finished speaking, his gaze paused on the hole in the stone wall in front of him. He saw a beautiful woman in white standing there and nodding at him as a greeting. That was the place where Yu Qianqiu came out from. Wei Chuanqiu, Yun Peng, and Xin Yu stuck their heads out from 3 different directions and looked in their direction. Hong Tai Long instantly realized that he had ruined their plan. He slapped his forehead and said, "So you're just sharpening your axe to cut firewood? I was wrong. I was wrong. You continue with your important business. I'll leave. I promise I won't disturb you anymore." He waved his hand repeatedly to signal Yu Qianqiu to go back, then turned around and left. F***CKU. Yu Qianqiu cursed loudly. He wanted nothing more than to go over and give him 2 kicks. The atmosphere was already ruined. What was the use of you leaving? Hong Tai Long pretended not to hear anything. He buried his head in a hole and crawled into it. He faced the wall and drew circles with his index finger. He kept mumbling, I was wrong. Right at this moment, Zhang Peng quickly dashed into the karst cave from the outside. He also heard Hong Tai Long shout and knew that his master had returned. It just so happened that he had something to talk to him about. Who knew that he would see his master so angry the moment he arrived? He stood at the entrance of the cave, not knowing what to do or what was going on. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Zhang Peng. He knew that he wouldn't come here for no reason. Therefore he suppressed his anger and temporarily put Hong Tai Long's matter aside. He walked over and asked, "What's the matter?" Zhang Peng was stunned. He immediately remembered why he was looking for his master. He quickly replied, "Wen Rue wanted to look for you a few times but unfortunately he never met you." "Wen Rue?" Yu Qianqiu paused and frowned. "Wen Rue from the Wen Lanfeng clan?" "Yes." Zhang Peng nodded. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why is he looking for me?" Let's go take a look." The master and disciple flew out together. In the base's conference room, Yu Qianqiu didn't have to wait long before Zhang Peng brought Wen Rue over. When Wen Rue saw Yu Qianqiu, he quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, torture envoy." "Ah, we're all acquaintances. Take a seat." Yu Qianqiu sat on the seat of honor. He asked curiously, "I heard that you've been looking for me a few times. What's the matter?" Wen Rue didn't sit. He walked up to him and cupped his hands. "I've been trying to find out something but unfortunately, I haven't been able to find out anything. Therefore I'd like to ask the torture envoy." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered. He could roughly guess what Wen Rue wanted to ask, but he still wore a faint smile on his face. "Ask away. There's no need to be so reserved. Then I'll be presumptuous." Wen Rue cupped his hands again and said, "Here's the thing. There are hundreds of cultivators from the Wen clan. Everyone knows that ancestor Wen Lanfeng has left with you, torture envoy. But this time we didn't even get to see him. Everyone really misses him, so they asked me to ask the torture envoy where our ancestor has gone. Or has something happened to him?" Yu Qianqiu sat up straight and tapped his fingers on the table. "To be honest, I don't know where your ancestor has gone. When I was still in the mystic immortal city, your ancestor found me. He said that he wanted to regain his dignity in front of Lu Yanqing. You should know that your ancestor has deep feelings for Valley Master Lu, so he left to cultivate alone. I've been looking for him often but unfortunately, I haven't heard from him yet. So, I'm also worried that something might have happened to him. So that's how it is." When Rue bowed, a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while, he looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. "Speak your mind. I'll definitely help you if I can solve any problems." Yu Qianqiu didn't finish his sentence. He wondered if the Wen clan didn't have the upper hand in the military competition system, so they wanted to find Wen Lanfeng to support them. If that was the case, he would have to reason with him. Unexpectedly, Wen Rui hesitated for a while and cupped his hands. I have a presumptuous request. I hope the torture envoy can agree to it. Tell me what it is first. Yu Qianshou smiled gently. Well, Wen Rui was a little embarrassed. To tell you the truth, the ancestor is the backbone of the Wen clan. Hundreds of clansmen want to find the ancestor and have been urging me to do so. I'm wondering, can the torture envoy allow me to go to the immortal realm to inquire about the ancestor? You want to leave this place alone? Yu Qianshou's smile froze, then he smiled faintly again. It's not that I don't want to promise you, but the immortal realm is currently in a time where the demonic Tao is running rampant. It's too dangerous for you to go out alone. I'm afraid that once you leave this place you'll most likely die. Wen Lanfeng is no longer here, so I have to be responsible for your safety. Wen Rui thought that this would be enough to make the other party retreat, but unexpectedly, Wen Rui plopped down on his knees and kowtowed, sobbing. Wen Rui has been entrusted by hundreds of clansmen to find the ancestor. Whether the ancestor is dead or alive, as long as there's news of the ancestor, we'll be at ease. As long as I can inquire about the ancestor's whereabouts, Wen Rui's insignificant life is nothing. Even if I die, it won't be regretted. Yu Qianshou was taken aback. Just a moment ago he had hardened his heart and had some killing intent. However, when a man like him knelt down and cried on the spot, he immediately felt apologetic. Thus, he felt pity for him and quickly got up to help him up. Get up. I understand your difficulties and your feelings. Such loyalty is commendable, how can I refuse you? How about this? Go back and make some preparations. When I leave I'll take you with me. How about that? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.